Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution. North Korea says they ready to step in and fight Israel and the U.S. with Iran. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, World War III alert. Everybody's building up their armies to continue the war in the Middle East. Let's get into the content. Salute.
Something striking came to light after Iranian strike on the U.S. base Al Udeid in Qatar, contradicting repeated statements by the U.S. and Qatar, which said there was no impact on the airbase. On June 23rd, the Iranian armed forces launched a barrage of ballistic missiles, using cheaper missiles as decoys to defeat Patriot air defenses, in response to the attack on its Fordow nuclear site. Al Udeid Air Base is the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East and serves as a forward headquarters for CENTCOM. The base houses a radar dome, which typically houses sensitive radar or satellite equipment, which greatly assists Israel in tracking missiles fired from Iran and Yemen. However, the strike was visually recorded at the base, showing that Iranian ballistic missiles successfully struck at least one target with high accuracy, taking a direct hit. It appears the radar dome was impaled right in the middle by a missile. Indeed, recent satellite imagery confirms the unusual appearance at Al Udeid base, both before and after the missile arrived. It was revealed that Iran destroyed a huge radar dome, a cutting-edge communications hub for the U.S. military, contradicting previous statements by Qatar and the U.S. that the base was undamaged. A general in Pentagon Room tells the story of 44 brave American warfighters who defended the entire Al Udeid air base from Iranian missile retaliation. This raises serious questions about the true damage assessment, the effectiveness of the U.S. air defense system in the Gulf, and whether Washington concealed vulnerabilities to avoid escalation or domestic backlash. At the time, the U.S. was in the best defensive position, having received advance warning from Iran to defend the base. But it's worth noting that Iran was just starting a game at that time.
What we just saw was they lied to y'all and told y'all Iranian did no damage when they struck their base in Qatar. And Iranians told y'all they did, and the U.S. lied about that. We're gonna dive deep into what's going on, but we definitely gonna get into North Korea. Absolutely says they will join Iran in fighting the imperialists.
What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving headfirst into a story that's setting the geopolitical world on fire. China's ramping up its military support for Iran, and it's got everyone talking. We're talking beefed up air defenses and, hold up, potentially even supplying Iran with cutting-edge warplanes like the J-10C. Yeah, you heard that right. The internet's buzzing with wild headlines like China just made Israel's air force useless. Is this legit or just clickbait? Let's break it all down, unpack the tech, the rivalries, and what this means for the power struggle in the Middle East. So grab your snacks, hit that like button to show some love, and let's jump into this wild ride of global power plays. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss a thing. Let's do this.
Ceasefire continues to hold. There are questions about what comes next. What's the current state of Iran's nuclear capabilities? And what will those reported talks between Iran and the US actually achieve.
Tehran's ally China is helping the Islamic Republic to replenish its defense capabilities. Reports suggest that Iran now possesses Chinese surface-to-air missile batteries. According to local media reports, the deliveries of Chinese surface-to-air missile batteries occurred after Iran-Israel ceasefire took effect on the 24th of June.
First off, let's set the stage. Iran's air defenses have been in the spotlight ever since its 12-day conflict with Israel last month, where Israeli F-35s and US stealth bombers like the B-2 tore through Iranian airspace with what some reports described as near impunity. Iran's aging fleet of Cold War-era jets, think F-14 Tomcats and MiG-29s, and its patchwork of Russian S-300s and homegrown Bavar 373 systems couldn't keep up. The Israeli Air Force's dominance exposed a glaring vulnerability. Iran's skies were wide open. Enter China, Iran's biggest oil customer and a rising military powerhouse, stepping in with what looks like a lifeline. Reports from sources like Middle East Eye and Pravda suggest that since the ceasefire on June 24th, China has delivered advanced air defense systems, possibly including the HQ-9B, and is in talks to supply J-10C fighter jets. This isn't just a small arms deal. It's a strategic move that could reshape how Iran defends itself and how its rivals, particularly Israel, plan their next steps.
Yeah, this actually makes sense for Iran because this actually even on this was even talked about on the Chinese social media, while the 12-day war was going on. What we're saying? They're saying, Iran has a strong spear, meaning they got their missiles, but they have a weak shield because, their airspace was still wide open. Israel were bombing them. And in the end, the Israel bombing was actually affecting Iranian missile launches because it was Israeli F-35 were starting to hunt missile launchers on the western side of Iran. And so what Iran now, during the ceasefire, their top priority is actually rebuild their air defense system so they can protect their missile launchers in the future if a future conflict breaks out. And this is where, Iran did have a deal with Russia for S-300 and then S-400, and I don't know why they haven't been delivered.
Neither do I. I don't know
I don't know. But Russia right now, they have their problem of their own. Well, obviously, Russia's top priority currently is Ukraine. I mean, that for them, that's the existential struggle they're focusing on. So maybe just simply the Russian defense industry does not have the bandwidth to come up with that. But China would have no problem. According to Western media, China have an overcapacity problem, right? So China has no problem. There's no supply side issue on producing defense.
So what's the deal with these Chinese air defense systems? Let's get into the juicy details. The HQ-9B is the star of the show here, a long-range surface-to-air missile SAM system that's often compared to Russia's S-300 or even the US Patriot system. This bad boy can engage targets up to 200 kilometers away with a radar that's got some serious chops for tracking stealth aircraft. Yes, even those sneaky F-35s Israel loves to fly. The HQ-9B uses active electronically scanned array, AESA radar, which is a big deal because it's harder to jam and can track multiple targets at once, from cruise missiles to drones to fighter jets.
China was going to export their Hongqi HQ air defense system to Turkey several years ago. This was shut down by Washington because Washington really did not like that, and so Washington killed that deal. And so China is ready to export its air defense system. In fact, China did export its air defense system to Pakistan, and in fact, the latest performance of Chinese weapon system during the Pakistan-Indian conflict may have convinced the Iranian officials to pursue the weapon purchase from China because the Chinese weapons are cost effective. They don't cost nearly as much as the Western systems, and there will be no supply issue. China can just keep on rolling them off the assembly line, and Iran right now, they don't have much time to waste. their goal is to build up their air defense as quickly as possible. This is, I think, it makes perfect sense for them to go to China. And recently, Iran defense minister went to China for SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, and that was a perfect opportunity for him to do the shopping. I mean, if that's what they had in mind, that was a perfect opportunity. There's talking about they might even get the J-10C fighter jet from China.
I saw that.
Because this is actually pretty big.
Posts on social media and reports from sites like Military Watch magazine have speculated that Iran's recent acquisitions include multiple batteries of these systems, paid for with oil shipments, since China imports nearly 90% of Iran's crude. This oil for arms barter is a clever workaround for sanctions, and it's deepening the Tehran-Beijing bromance. The HQ-9B's ability to counter modern threats could make it tougher for Israel to waltz into Iranian airspace, like it did last month, forcing planners in Tel Aviv to rethink their strategies. But the HQ-9B isn't the only system in China's arsenal that could beef up Iran's defenses. There's chatter about the HQ-22, a slightly less advanced but still potent SAM system with a range of about 170 kilometers. It's cheaper, easier to deploy, and still packs a punch against non-stealth aircraft and missiles. Then there's the FL-2000B, a short-range system designed to swat down drones and low-flying threats, which is critical given Israel's heavy use of drones in the 12-day war. The Times of Israel noted Israel's Rising Lion operation leaned heavily on drones, including quadcopters and micro-drones for precision strikes inside Iranian territory. If Iran can layer these systems, HQ-9B for long-range, HQ-22 for mid-range, and FL-2000B for close-in defense, it could create a multi-tiered shield that makes penetrating its airspace a lot riskier. This isn't just about hardware. It's about building a network that integrates radar, command systems, and missile batteries to cover Iran's vast territory, from nuclear sites to military bases. Now let's talk about why these matters for the balance of power. Iran's air defenses have historically relied on a mix of Russian tech like the S-300 PMU-2 and its own Bavar 373, which is decent but struggles against cutting-edge stealth platforms. The Israeli strikes showed just how outmatched these systems were against modern threats. China's systems, particularly the HQ-9B, could close that gap. Military analysts cited in sources like Defense Security Asia argue that the HQ-9B's advanced radar and long-range missiles could challenge non-stealth platforms like Israel's F-15s and F-16s, and even give F-35s a harder time. Pair that with China's airborne warning and control systems, AWACS, which Iran is reportedly eyeing, and you've got a system set up where Iran could integrate these systems effectively. The challenge isn't just about getting the gear, it's about training crews, maintaining the systems, and linking them into a cohesive defense network. Iran's got experience with Russian tech, but Chinese systems have different standards, and integrating them with existing platforms like the Bavar 373 or Qatar drones could be tricky. Posts on X, like one from Akalja on June 25, 2025, suggest Iran's banking on China's overcapacity to rebuild its defenses quickly, but this isn't an overnight fix. It'll take time to train personnel and optimize these systems for Iran's rugged terrain and sprawling military sites.
Private Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange, if you actually go back to 2009, there are some really significant leaks about the IAEA and its incoming director, Yukiya Amano. It turns out that according to those leaks, Jeffrey Piat, I don't know if you remember him, he was the U.S. diplomat who was on the line with Victoria Nuland plotting the coup in the Maidan in 2014, basically saying who was going to be the leader of Ukraine after they overthrow its elected government. Before that role, he was, prior to being U.S. ambassador in Kiev, he was the U.S. charge at the IAEA. And there are State Department cables showing him stating that Amano has promised that he will be on the American side that can support his nomination, and that he will maintain ambiguity in public but do what the U.S. wants in private, particularly on Iran. This is 2009. Amano was then replaced by Grossi after suffering a mysterious illness and dying. And Rafael Grossi, the current director of the IAEA, has announced his intention to run for Secretary General of the United Nations. Now, if you want to be the head of the UN, you need the US on your side. You need Germany and all the European powers, basically P5+1, who were in charge of negotiating with Iran, when in fact the IAEA as a multilateral institution should have been in charge. And so Grossi clearly has been groomed as well by the United States and by Israel for this role, and was never going to be an honest broker with Iran. And it's obvious because of what he did just days before Israel attacked. He introduced a resolution for the first time declaring Iran in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which set the stage for Israel to stage this attack and claim that they're rescuing the world from Iran's evil nuclear program.
Speaking of those J-10C jets, they're another piece of this puzzle that's got everyone talking. The J-10C, nicknamed the Vigorous Dragon or even Rafale Killer, is a 4.5 generation multi-role fighter with AESA radar, PL-15 long-range missiles, and solid electronic warfare capabilities. Reports from India Today and Newsweek indicate Iran's in high-level talks to buy dozens of these jets, maybe 36 or even 40, according to some social media posts, after a failed deal for Russian Su-35s fell through. The J-10C is a big upgrade over Iran's creaky F-4 Phantoms and MiG-29s, which barely got off the ground during Israeli aggression. Its delta-wing canard design makes it nimble in dogfights, and those PL-15 missiles could outrange some Western counterparts, giving Iran a credible counter to Israel's air superiority. A viral post on social media on July 1st even claimed Iran's already received 40 J-10Cs, though there's no official confirmation from Tehran or Beijing. If true, this could narrow the tech gap with Israel's F-35s, though Bulgarian military notes it won't fully tip the scales given terrorist Israel's stealth and sensor fusion edge. So does this make the Israeli Air Force useless? Yes, quite literally. Israel's F-35s, backed by US support and advanced drones, still hold a qualitative edge, as The Atlantic and the Times of Israel detailed in their coverage of Israel's dominance in the last battle. The J-10C and HQ-9B are serious upgrades, but they're not a silver bullet. Israel's got experience bypassing advanced defenses. Plus, Israel's diplomatic push is pressuring China to rethink this deal, leveraging Beijing's economic clout over Iran. Still, Iran's moves signal a longer-term shift. China's not just selling weapons, it's betting on Iran to counter Western influence in the region. This pivot also has broader implications. China's support, facilitated by oil for arms deals, reflects a geopolitical alignment against the US and its allies. Middle East Eye and J-Feed report that Arab states and the White House are aware of Iran's buildup, which could complicate future US or Israeli strikes. Iran's also diversifying away from Russia, frustrated by delays in Su-35 deliveries, as this could pull Iran deeper into China's orbit, reshaping Middle East alliances. But there's a catch. Sanctions, technical integration, and China's cautious arms export stance, as its defense ministry emphasized, could slow things down. So what's the bottom line? China's aid is a big deal for Iran, giving it tools to challenge Israel's air dominance and protect its skies. The HQ-9B and J-10C could make future Israeli operations riskier but useless? That's not even a stretch. Iran's playing catch-up, and while China's tech is a boost, it's flipping the board just yet. The real story is the long game, how this strengthens Iran's resilience and shifts regional power dynamics. Keep your eyes on this one because the Middle East skies are only getting hotter. Thank you so much for watching. As the world heats up, we're on a mission to cut through the noise for you. We're diving deep into the news, piecing together the stories that matter, and delivering fresh, unfiltered perspectives straight from the heart of it all. But we can't do this alone.
for my conversation with Professor Anna Malandog. There is something major going on in the Philippines. So to my Filipino viewers, make sure to tune in tomorrow at about 10 p.m. Manila time. So I'm going to put the link for you guys in the chat box, and I will see you about this tomorrow. So as I said, North Korea, how are we going to be looking at this now moving forward? It's not a small matter. Mark my word on this. It's because, first of all, North Korea does not bluff and will not bluff. But when you think about the statements, and I'm going to be providing you a picture of the meeting that took place inside Tehran. That was one of the things I was working on also to make sure. And believe it or not, guys, I had to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, couldn't sleep. And the reason I couldn't sleep, and I'll share it with you, it's our community. It's just I was thinking about the possible scenarios, what could happen. And I really couldn't sleep at all. It took me about an hour and a half before I fall back asleep. And I tried to play that in my head ahead of time, just thinking. It's because for North Korea to announce they're going to enter the fight if and when the United States and Israel violate the ceasefire. So it makes you just wonder, first of all, why North Korea will issue a statement like that? Is it because they know that both the US and Israel will not honor their commitments? Is this also, because of what the US has a tendency of the wind is going back on its word? And third, is this statements because of what the US is preparing in the East? And that is one of the things I will be talking about tomorrow with Professor Anna Malandog. And I am going to do something also special for our community on Monday. So I'm not going to disclose. There are sometimes certain things I just don't want to disclose till time comes in. So suffice it to say for now is that the announcement by North Korea is a game changer. So because when North Korea is stating that it stands ready to support Iran, that's not a nice settled way of saying we're going to fight alongside with Iran against the US and Israel. And as a matter of fact, North Korea has already issued some very fiery statements about Israel. So I'm not going to get into that here. Suffice it to focus on what this means. What this means from a geopolitical perspective and from a security aspect.
The same way he helped Putin fight NATO in Russia, he will help Iran fight Israel in the U.S. Kim is ready to fight, man. He got a nuclear power. He got plenty of weapons over there, and he's not stupid. If he's not gonna let the U.S. pick Iran off, then go after Russia and go after China, he might as well fight now before they come after him. That's a smart thing to do.
Mind you, that what North Korea described the attacks by both the U.S. and Israel on Iran, as a proof of the worldliness of the international standards. It is very interesting that coming from North Korea to be issuing this up. And here is one thing. I'm going to share a link with you pertaining to the international law to this particular aspect. You guys don't have to read it if you don't want to, but this is for later on if you want to educate yourself about this. But I'm going to share a paragraph with you from this particular statements or report. Here is what says in Article 1 about the prohibition of the use of force under international law, especially Article 2, Section 4 of the UN Charter. It says, and I quote, Article 2, Section 4 of the UN Charter enshrines the obligation of all members to refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The International Court of Justice considers the prohibition on the use of force under Article 2, Section 4 of the UN Charter to constitute both an obligation under customary international law and what it has characterized as a cornerstone of the United Nations charters. End of quote. And just to highlight to you the importance that it was clear and evident, at least I speak for my country. I'm not going to talk about Israel because that's their perspective. Or I'll talk about my own country for how he violated the law international law that is. And this is where I found it very, very interesting that North Korea is stating this aspect first instead of stating force, use of force. Because remember what North Korea is saying. We, and I quote, we stand strongly by Iran. So the word stand strongly, it's a subtle way in a reference to force. It's because what North Korea is going to bring to the table is a major firepower. That I don't think so, and I'm going to say it straightforward. I don't think so Israel will survive, even with the support of the US, because North Koreans not going to bluff. And we saw what happened with the Houthis, which I'm going to talk about too in a second here. So here's what took place and why I didn't want to disclose the information yesterday, because it was a meeting taking place in Tehran at the North Korean embassy inside Tehran. So, and the meeting, and I have a picture here. There it is. This was taken as of July 10th, which was yesterday. So, and what you see on the Iranian side is Mohammed Ali Amani. He's the Secretary General of Iran Islamic Coalition Party, and the North Korean ambassador Hang Sang. So, but here is what Hang Sang said, which praising Iran's recent operation against Israeli aggression, end of quote. So, what I found also interesting about the statements of the ambassador, North Korean ambassador, is that North Korea sort of expressed its unwavering support for Iran's legitimate right to self-defense. Once again, guys, the wording is measured. This is what I always wanted to get you to understand. You know, it can go both ways, like what we do. We play with words. You know, that's to manipulate the masses. But on the other hand, something like this that is legit and true and factual, the wording is precise and specific. So North Korea praised Iran's recent operations against Israel aggression. It's straightforward as to the violation of the international law, but also the support of Iran for self-defense. So, now, here is the thing about all this. The response from the Iranian side was that they commended North Korea's stance while emphasizing the unity of the regional resistance front, which is, by the way, as a geopolitical analyst, the way I look at it and why Iran will be wording it this way is because this regional resistance front will be considered as a key to ensuring security in West Asia. You're looking at two tracks here. You're looking at the geopolitical aspect and you're looking at the security aspects of it. So, and this is where, to me, the entrance of North Korea into the fray, into the fight per se, is going to now put the question mark on the United States and Israel. And what do I mean by this? The US and Israel now, they're going to have to think twice about attacking Iran. That's one. Second, all the recent statements coming out of Netanyahu in Washington when he was there, 3 days ago, all of them hinted at the direction of, I wanted to reach a peace with Hamas, I wanted to reach peace with the Houthis, and I want to reach a peace or agreement with Iran. So all this didn't happen in a vacuum. It's also, once again, my conviction, my understanding is that both the United States and Israel understand what North Korea is going to bring to the table as far as firepower. So this is why I'm saying it's a game changer. There is no other way of looking at it. There is one aspect I need you to think about this. From behind the scenes, could this be coordinated with both Russia and China? What do you think? Because remember, North Korea is a client of both Russia and China, but is also a good partner or friend, or whatever term you want to use, with Iran. So the timing of the statements of the North Korean, is it because of the behind the scenes coordination with Russia and China? Yes or no? Let me just see your answer in the chat box. Heck, you say yep. Fermida, you say definitely yes. Francis Tango, you say I don't think North Korea wants to cooperate with war. Why is that, Francis? It's because if they are not willing to get into a fight, they would have not stated this. So that's just my opinion, and I respect your insights for this. Damascus, you say yes. Ramples one. What is the question? The question was Russia and China behind the scenes coordinating with North Korea to move forward with these public statements? In other words, for North Korea to get into this, it was coordinated with Russia and China. So Javier Carter or Cater, you say yes indeed. Tato, Wendy, you say yes. Oh, I missed this one. I wanted to share it with the community here. So the Nobel nitpicker, North Korea is the real MVP in all this. You know what? You got a point there. It's because that's why I said it last time. I said, mark my word, North Korea will be part of this alliance should this move forward. It's because it's now or never. And this is why I am thinking personally now, both the US and Israel will have to think now twice. And because, again, the firepower North Korea is going to bring to the table is within reach also, in addition to what Iran has regarding the US installations in West Asia or Middle East, that is. As for Israel, it is, to me, I look at it, it will be destroyed. And that is why you see a reverse in policy. There is one thing you have to know about geopolitics is that
Israel is NATO wild card. Israel plays the crazy nation with nukes that can't be controlled. Well, that's what North Korea is finna play. The crazy nation with nukes on the revolutionary side that can't be controlled.
It's not constant. Sometimes the changes in events will force you to change your position. It doesn't mean you are flip-flopping. No. It's just you have to accommodate or go with what the recent trend is regarding the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground that I see, looking over the horizon, is that if this will move that direction as far as the US and Israel attacking Iran again, North Korea is going to intervene militarily with Iran. I am sure Russia and China will do something behind the scenes, but if they are to go through North Korea, it will be okay. Because remember, there's one thing that is not been disclosed openly, is that it was the Russia that provided the targets to the Houthis. Because remember, the Russians have their own so-called satellite systems where they can pick up the targets. Remember that Houthis are not doing this out of thin air. And that's my arguments here. So you have to keep that in mind. So, and this, when you have now the thinking, this is what North Korea is now expressing, which I am a little bit surprised as to the public statements. When it's stating that resistance is the only path to secure the rights of the people of Iran, Korea, Palestine, and other regional nations. And of course. And what I found also interesting, the statement by Amani, the Iranian representative in this meeting, when he said that this alliance, which comprises of Iran, North Korea, Russia, and China, could shape a new world order. Which exactly what I argued before, because you're looking now at the transformation of the global order, moving from a unipolar to a multipolar. We are having a hard time in Washington accepting this reality, but it won't matter whether we accept it or not. The world is moving on, and that shift has already taken place. This is why you're seeing the ill-conceived policies of the United States. These are not strategies. This is just reactionary policies. And this is why now the way you have to look at this with the presence of North Korea, or the entrance of North Korea into this particular fray, if I may use the term, is the idea of what you'll be looking at is the idea of the level of deterrence. This is one of the key, because Iran doesn't have that one yet. North Korea does, whether it's just missiles or even the bomb. That is why, remember what the statements of the Russian president, I think he was the president, or Sergei Lavrov, I couldn't remember, and please, if you do remember, share with the community. When he stated, one of them stated that there are countries willing to provide a nuclear weapon to Iran. Is this one of them? So, because now you're looking at a change in the balance of power. You're looking at a changes in the deterrence power that is arising from this cooperation. And why? It's because with the statement of North Korea, it will guarantee the ceasefire, because Israel and the United States will have to think twice. The US, we already are retreating. We don't want to get involved. We saw what happened with the Houthis. We saw what Iran's message when they attacked Al-Udeida base in Qatar, you know. And this is why I'm saying you have to put this within the bigger picture. And that bigger picture is that the entrance of North Korea is going to tilt the balance of power now and makes it even playing field. Israel and the US will have to think twice. And that's why the representative of Iran stated, and I quote, "Today, Iran is the defensive barrier of Eastern civilizations against Western expansionism. And if this barrier collapses, the storm will head eastward." End of quote. And that's what he warned. It was very clear message that it's now or never. Otherwise, it's going to become a serious problem.
Liking this video so far? Don't just be a watcher. Go ahead and hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And don't forget to tap the bell so you will not miss any of my videos or live streams. This way, you will be supporting a channel that stands for the truth and objective reporting. The choice is yours. Thanks for your support.
And yes, I do appreciate your support. So please hit that like button and subscribe and share the video with others. So now let's go back to, again, I have to, because I read the statements. That's why I spent time looking for the information, because I want to get you something that is worth your time. Ambassador Han, who is the ambassador of North Korea, he also referenced to something very interesting. Wasn't about the military cooperation, because remember, Iran's missile technology is from North Korea, FYI. The Russians have helped to a degree, but mainly is North Korea. But he didn't refer to that. He didn't reference to this one. He referred to the historical cooperation between Tehran and Pyongyang under sanctions and pressure, because both countries are sanctioned by the US. And this is where I found his statements important. Here is what he said, and I quote, we have stood by the Iranian people since the start of the Zionist aggression against Iran. The West cannot be trusted and is always seeking to undermine the sovereignty of independent Eastern countries. End of quote. Remember, he didn't say independent of global country or world or whatever. He specifically talked about Eastern countries, because Europe is already under the thumb of US. We already know that. And moving forward, he went ahead and issue again another statement, even though they did it before, is that he condemned the US attack on Iran peaceful nuclear facilities, which were, by the way, under IAEA supervision. And that, as I shared at the beginning, is proof of the worthless of the international standards. So that's, to me, it's as clear as it gets. So now you put this in perspective and you add the where's the picture? I thought I had a picture here. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna upload it here quickly. Thanks for your patience, guys. There we go. And you already saw this because I put it into the community, but you have to bring this into the conversation. And this one has to do with the statements by the US that's trying to put a spin into this. Of course, what has not been disclosed as of yesterday or the day before, after Sunday, because that's when the Houthis launched the missile into Israel. So, is that Yemen Houthis fire at Israel airport once again, aimed search for Red Sea ship crew, because Israel wanted to do this one. So 4 sailors from the Eternity Sea were dead, and 10 of them were found alive. 11 of them still missing, and 6 believed to be in Houthis' hand. In other words, they're hostage with the Houthis. So now here's the thing. That's why the Houthis try to fire or strike once again Ben Gurion Airport after, here is the key, after the sinking of the 2 vessels in the Red Sea this week, because it started on Sunday and it followed by Monday. 2 ships. Remember, it was the Greek ship that had Liberian flag, and the second one was the Majestic Seas. That's the one. So, and all this is because the Houthis now ramping up the military pressure, as you know. And this is why I'm saying, try to see this development and add North Korea's factor to that. And because that's what Sari said, we moved to, by the way, which excuse me, which the media didn't disclose. Do you guys know that the Houthis had moved to rescue a number of the ship's crew and provide them with medical care and transport them to a safe location? Of course, they're going to hold them, but they're going to have to take care of that. And they did. They're not going to lie about this. I've been around long enough, especially during my trips to Yemen and all that. And I know for a fact how the group operates and thinks. They're not going to lie. They're not going to just issue these statements. So, and this is why the U.S. Embassy in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, countered this argument. And where did they counter that? Did they counter it on a really public press, the White House press room? No. They put statements on X, accusing Houthis of kidnapping the crew members and killing the shipmates, so sinking their ship and hampering rescue efforts. What a lie! That's what the Trump administration is doing, and those usually, it's a clear indication of the failure of how much we don't have a strategy in place, how much we don't know what to do, how much we just reacting to events as they happen. So, because the attack on the Eternity Sea, the ship that is, came one day after the Houthis struck and sank the Magic Seas ship, which is the picture and the clip that I shared with you the day before. So, and that's to highlight to you the idea. Of course, some of the crews were rescued. So, and that's when Israel on Sunday launched an attack, bombing the ports of Hodeidah. I found the exact location here, guys, just to share it with you. Let me see if you can see it clearly. Yeah, those are the locations: the Salif port, Ras Isa port, and Hodeidah port. Those are the locations where the Israelis targeted the ports on Sunday. So Ras Isa, Salif, as well as Ras Kantib. Those are some. Suffice it to say, one another piece of information that a lot of people did not know is that the Houthis have been holding members, 25 crew members of the Galaxy for 430 days before they released them on January this year, 2025. So This is what I'm saying. And of course, it goes without saying they are not disclosing they in Tel Aviv and in Washington. And of course, Western Europeans are useless anyway. Excuse me. What they are not disclosing is the massive destruction that already happened inside Israel. So I'm going to share a picture with you here. This is inside Israel, inside Tel Aviv, I believe so. And I remember I had I don't know where I put the link for this one. Anyway, I look for it later on. I just saved the picture. This is the firefighters inspecting the site struck by an Iranian missile that killed several people. So I just wanted to, this way, and I have to show you what is going on. Of course, you reach your own conclusions and decisions. And that is where this importance of North Korea's entrance into this makes perfect sense now, that the deterrence, the US now will have to think twice. Israel, of course, cannot do anything on its own. That I know for a fact. There is no way Israel will do anything on its own, because we already retreated from supporting Israel against the Houthis. It's almost like they're left by themselves now. Are they going to handle 3 fronts? The Hezbollah front, which is not activated anyway at this time. So you have Hezbollah, Houthis, Iran, and now you add North Korea to the mix. There is no way. There is no way. That's why I feel comfortable stating the word a game changer, because it is on all levels. And North Korea will want to do this because they wanted also to prevent the US from moving eastward. And you will know why tomorrow when I have my conversation with Professor Anna Malandog, and on Monday, because of specific topic that I am going to be doing for you. I already lined up what I'm going to be covering, and I'm going to be reaching out to some people that I know to confirm certain aspects. Now, with all this in mind, you have to think also in terms of what North Korea brings to the table with all this. So I'm going to share one excerpt, if you allow me, from my Iran book, and I think there is another one from my Russia book, to put a perspective, because I addressed the Iran aspects on both books. So history shows us that the political turbulence that followed the collapse of the Soviet Union, as the United States failed to lead the international community on its own. Consider, for example, the genocide in Rwanda that took place, in which a paralyzed US failed to intervene. Note the failed state in Somalia, which demonstrated the US inability to engage in guerrilla warfare. Observe North Korea's ability to acquire nuclear weapons, which showed a lack of US political influence over nations that could proliferate nuclear technology. Recon the 9/11 attacks, which brought about a militarized foreign policy. Witness the invasion of Iraq, which demonstrated a lack of credibility in the US. Contemplate the rise of China, which underlines the shift of wealth from the West to the East. Mark the civil war in Syria, which demonstrated a US ill-defined and weak foreign policy. And lastly, behold the conquest of the Islamic State, which shows a lack of US understanding that the Islamic State dilemma requires an ideological solution rather than a military approach. To simplify the issue, we shall consider Iran's nuclear dossier under 3 models of behavior, namely the North Korean model, the Libyan model, and the Japanese model. So before going any further, one must briefly shed light on the 3 models Iran may have pursued in the events of negotiations with P5+1 failed. And it was the reason why I wanted to disclose this. Excuse me. And the reason for that, guys, excuse me, the reason for that is that if North Korea moving forward with its entrance into this, that means North Korea is willing now to move forward with the nuclear aspects of it, should Iran decide to move that direction. Well, we already know Iran already made the first step with what's the word? Stopping any cooperation with IAEA. It's the same step that North Korea did. That's how they kicked out the IAEA, because you can't trust the IAEA. As a matter of fact, I am starting to be convinced that maybe the IAEA, the one that provides the names and locations of scientists. So I just can't trust them. I know this for a fact. So. And this is why, if we go back into history, you go back to March, and I was really aware of this one, March of 1993. This is when North Korea exercised its right to withdraw from NPT. Do you know that you have a right to exit the IAEA if you don't want to? So, and that's why North Korea at that time embarked on a policy of defiance and went ahead and sort of declared its intention to enrich plutonium at a military grade level. Like I always say, guys, think about it today. Can we threaten North Korea? Or any country for that matter? No, but especially us. It's us who that do this kind of stuff. And other countries won't go about it. And this is why, just to support my own claim for regarding this one, this is why North Korea declared both its intention to produce nuclear bomb and its capability over the winter. So, leaving no room for doubts. And that's what I'm starting to lean towards. The entrance of North Korea into the Iran front will not only be on the military front, but also will be on the technological aspect as far as nuclear weapon production. That's the only way I see it. So because when, and again, I use history as my guide, and I go back to this era because I was aware of it, and I did the research on it when I wrote the books and so forth. And when I think back about it, I was always asking the question, why will North Korea do that? Because, meaning declaring openly its intention to produce a nuclear weapon and its capability of doing so. So what wasn't clear to me at that time is that whether Western intelligence agency can account accurately for how many nuclear bombs that North Korea possesses. And that's something still under argument. Western intelligence, sorry guys, I forgot this one. Western intelligence couldn't. We have no idea, Of course, later on, we kind of get an idea of how many nuclear warheads they have. So, and this is why this ignorance on part of the Western intelligence is attributed to two main factors. First, which is as clear as daylight, the Western intelligence cannot infiltrate North Korea to get first-hand knowledge of what North Korea has. And second, North Korea's leadership, tight control over population, prevent any foreign contact. And this is not a surprise. Even when you go on a trip, the trips are sort of directed by the government and so. It's their country. Who am I to judge them? They didn't harm me here. Why will I dislike them? Why will I? No, I won't. I got nothing against them. And, it's just the way it is. So, and this is why it makes more sense to me, for me personally, to start to think in terms of, finally, is Iran reaching that point of saying, you know what, we've had it. We try to compromise. We try to negotiate. We try to reason with the West. But each time we've been played out. Well, you blame yourself in this case. And that is why, in the case or the model of North Korea, when they withdrew from the NPT, rendering any means of control unavailable. Because IAEA controlling the process. All it needs to do is issue a report that says, oh no, Iran is enriching uranium at a high level. That's all it takes. Rafael Grossi, the head of the IAEA, is as corrupted as it gets. The whole entity is corrupted. So, and that is why, here is the key. And I had a chance to read it. When you read the articles within the treaty, So that's the one that may have contributed to the North Korea's justification for withdrawal, because you look at Article, I think Article 10, if I'm not mistaken, which one of the NPTs provide, and I put this in quote, a right to withdraw from the treaty if the withdrawing party decides that extraordinary events related to the subject matter of this treaty have jeopardized the supreme interest of its country. So, and of course, there is one more thing also, is that it also requires that a withdrawing state party gives 3 months notice. And that is why I am leaning more and more towards realizing that the entrance of North Korea is to reshape the trajectory of Iran's nuclear path. And again, Huna, I'm not inside, I'm not part of that. So maybe they reach that consensus and decide to go forward with this, because you can't trust the West. Yeah, that's it's. I'm not telling you something you guys do not know. That's just the norm. So. And and when you think about the idea of and again, for North Korea, they have experience with Americans. That is why they can't trust it. That's exactly what I wrote in my Russia book, and I'm going to share the excerpt with you here. Recall my reference to America's unilateral decisions to withdraw from the Iran nuclear agreement. I am convinced that North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, has factored in prior to his 2 meetings with Trump in Singapore and Vietnam, respectively, that he, Kim, does not and will not trust Trump no matter what the latter says or promises. Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran agreement testifies to Kim's thinking. U.S. withdrawal from agreements and treaties, bilateral or otherwise, shows Trump's inconsistencies. Countries around the world, including North Korea, are convinced that trusting the United States is a liability moving forward. They must be asking, how can we trust the United States, which says one thing, then does another? Spot on. Because that's logical reasoning, that's logical thinking. And that is why I am seeing now, like I always say, consider yourself lucky to be alive to witness the history in the making, because you are taking part of this history. Just think about it that way. And all this, I'm already ahead of this, because I argued this way back, that what if Iran end up going that? So that means we're going to have to learn to live with a nuclear Iran. So, because that's the only other alternative for American ill-conceived foreign policy establishment. That's all it has at its disposal, is to learn, excuse me, is to learn to live with an armed nuclear Iran, as it does with Pakistan, India, and North Korea. Under no circumstances, guys, under no circumstances am I simplifying this. Do we use the term dangerous alternative? It's going to alter the history. It's going to alter the geopolitical and the security landscapes in the region and beyond. So under no circumstances I'm simplifying this. No. It's just I'm being pragmatic here in questioning what else does the U.S. can do against Iran, which, by the way, which, by the way, survived harsh sanctions for over 30 plus years. So despite all these restrictions imposed upon it, it was able to influence the outcome, meaning Iran. So, and regardless how much we keep saying, oh, Iran is a pariah, it continues to be, and all that, Iran continues to march forward. And all that is the idea of strengthening its military defenses, influencing the region, because it's the major player in the region. Are you going to think about Saudi Arabia as a regional player? They're pathetic. Are you going to think of, who else are you going to think about? Turkey? Well, Turkey just an ally of a member of NATO, but it's just being used because of geographical location. What does Turkey has to contribute to NATO besides the geographical location? Heck, we couldn't even, Erdogan is almost begging for F-35s, and we're saying we're going to think about it. This is what I'm saying. So for Iran, it continued to march forward, expanding that influence in a region that is known also for its shifting loyalties and allegiances. That is one thing about West Asia and Middle East that you need to understand. And this leads me to, I think, my last point here, and I'll see if there's any super sticker question I will answer for you guys. And I'm going to share a screen with you. But first, I need to show you a picture here. And this is not a classified, by the way, and this is from the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. So I'm familiar with them. We used to do some work with them as well and all that stuff. So what am I showing you here, guys, about the Houthis? Because I have to go back to the Houthis factor here, because the Houthis is the wild card. North Korea's entrance into this fray now, it only makes it even bigger. But the Houthis are the wild card. Why is this? Because when you go back and look at the date here, guys, 2017, this is when the Houthis start to grow their UAV, the unmanned aerial vehicles, of course with the support of Iran. But look at the radius. And all this ties also to the missiles. Look how far. Look what the Shahed 136 can reach, 2,500 kilometers. Look where Israel is, right there on the Samad, which is about 1,800 kilometers. So it makes you just wonder, everything is within reach. And that's my point. And I'm going to share a screen with you guys and again, it's not classified. I'm able to share this one with you. All right, share screen. There we go. DIA, what is DIA? Right there. So, and I'm just briefly gonna go through the slides here just to show you a few things. You know, why the Houthis, and this one was released on February 24th. So, and again, I'm all I want to share with you guys is some pictures to highlight few key ideas that you need to understand. And all this has been on development since 2014. And what happened in 2014? You all know. Saudi Arabia, with the help of Americas and Germany and France and Britain and all that, were attacked. The Houthis were attacked. 6 other Arab countries have contributed to that fight in Yemen against the Houthis. Yeah, 6 Arab countries. I had the list. I think I did share it with you guys. What a shame on the Arab countries. And yet they call themselves Muslims. So anyway, that's a conversation for another day. But suffice it to say, that when you look at this one here, guys, you look at the developments of the range of the Houthis, how far they can go. It's no secret that Iran is providing the training, the funding, and so forth. But at the same time, is the capabilities that's now is going to really, this is what I'm saying, the entrance of North Korea into the scene, it's not a good sign for Israel. We're talking about massive destruction of the Jewish state, and I can go with that. That means and again, where my big concern is, and I'm going to share this with you because I like to have your input. If you can just leave it in the comments, whatever. Will Israel move into using its nuclear weapon if it sees its massive destruction? Yes or no? In the chat box. Let me see. Will Israel end up deploying its nuclear weapon
North Korea,
if it became clear that it's going to be defeated? All right, I'm gonna check this later on because there is a delay here, so I have to keep going here. So this is the idea. When you look at the the exhibits of this military hardware, those are not small items here. We're looking at some advanced stuff here. So, and this is why I'm going to stop this one here, guys. This is why you have to think in terms, what are all these means? How this is now going to shape that trajectory of what's going on with the entrance now of North Korea. So that's the way. Priest of Hiroshima, you say yes. Bamboo, you say yes. Humayun, you say yes. Abdullah Farouk, you say no. The West was the Francis Tango was the question. The question is, if it became clear that Israel will be destroyed, will it deploy the nuclear weapon against Iran? So, Cambridge Business, you say no. Gio, you say anything is possible. Surgeon D's, U.S. nuke to Japan, yeah. Yeah, it's give and take. It's gonna be, because remember, if there is, to me, the way I look at it, if we reach this point, there will be a massive distraction, and Israel might not have a chance to even have the opportunity to deploy its nuclear. And that's the way I read it. And again, I am not trying to just simplify this, but if North Korea used its military hardware, we're looking at a massive, in addition to what the Houthis have. Remember, the Houthis also possess, and what Iran has. And as I said earlier, the Hezbollah front is not being activated yet. So all this hints at different dynamics, and that is something I wanted to get ahead of it by sharing this brief analysis with you, to give you an idea as to what lies ahead moving forward. So now that North Korea officially and publicly disclosed their support for Iran. And again, I do find it interesting for the timing that both China and Russia might have worked behind the scenes with North Korea. So that's the only way I see it. So. All right, guys, let me say thank you to some of you. Once again, Noel, I truly appreciate you, man, for your continued support for the channel.
Now, Western politicians and mainstream media want you to hate Iran. If you listen to Trump, Netanyahu, or any US politician talking about the Middle East, they always say the same thing. Iran must not have a nuclear weapon because it's the biggest threat to the region's security. But upon simple analysis, the exact opposite is true. The Middle East and the entire world would likely be a much safer place if Iran had a nuclear bomb. Now, I know this sounds crazy, and you're probably thinking, how could a country like Iran, having access to such a destructive weapon, possibly make things safer? But the truth is far more complex. The answer is deterrence, and it's the sole reason the Soviet Union and the United States never fought World War III. In a perfect world, yes, there would be fewer weapons, but we don't live in a perfect world. And that idealism ignores the reality of the geopolitical situation. Right now, Israel holds an estimated 90 nuclear warheads. This gives them an entirely disproportionate advantage in the region, and it's exactly why Israel can do whatever they want without any consequences. It's no surprise that Israel right now is bombing 4 separate countries while simultaneously carrying out a 2-year-long genocide against the Palestinian people. But their main target, it's Iran. And that's why just a few weeks ago, they launched an unprovoked attack against them for pursuing nuclear weapons that the country doesn't even have. But What if they did? In today's video, we're going to break down exactly what this scenario would look like. Let's be honest. Israel is fighting for regime change in Iran. This has been the focal point of Israel's foreign policy for the past 3 decades. The current Israeli government believes the majority of the land in the region was promised to them by God, and that they are the chosen people. Key cabinet officials openly call for the expansion of Israel's borders to those described in the Bible as part of Greater Israel. That includes much of modern-day Egypt and Syria. And this isn't mere rhetoric either. Israel has already annexed several territories in Syria. This right-wing extremist government's desire to expand its territory for its chosen people follows the exact same playbook as fascist regimes in the past. Think of Hitler's push eastward for Lebensraum, or living space for the Aryan Germans, or Mussolini's quest to build what he called a new Roman Empire across much of northern Africa. But instead of racial superiority, Israeli ultra-Zionists use a theocratic approach, claiming these lands were promised to them by God. To secure what they believe to be their divine destiny, the Israelis must remove any impediments in the region that could challenge this goal. And to ensure this, every government in the region must be destabilized. Israel has a population of only 9 million people, so they can't take on their neighbors alone. And this is where the United States comes in. Through AIPAC, Israel dominates U.S. politics, buying the loyalty of the vast majority of U.S. politicians. This influence is so strong that American politicians openly wear Israeli military uniforms to Congress, fly Israeli flags outside congressional offices, and advocate for Israel's interest over those of Americans. You have one of the most recognizable American politicians in Ted Cruz stating that one of his largest goals in politics was to support the interests of a foreign nation.
I came into Congress 13 years ago with the stated intention of being the leading defender of Israel in the United States Senate. Great. And I've worked every day to do that.
Such actions would be unimaginable if you were to replicate them with any other country. This political capture has enabled Israel to receive billions from the U.S. every year, totaling over $305 billion in U.S. aid since 1951. As a result, the U.S. has been dragged into countless conflicts in the Middle East against Israel's neighbors. Just listen to General Wesley Clark explain America's plan to take out all of Israel's adversaries.
See him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today. And he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me.
Nearly all of these countries have been neutralized. Iraq was taken out on the lie of them having weapons of mass destruction. Libya was destroyed by a NATO bombing campaign, leaving it completely destabilized. Somalia is a failed state. Sudan is facing a civil war. Syria was overthrown with U.S. and Israeli backing, and Hezbollah in Lebanon has largely been incapacitated. The last remaining obstacle? Iran. Currently, Iran is a fully sovereign nation, independent of U.S. and Israeli influence. In 1953, Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh sought to nationalize Iran's oil, taking control away from British petroleum. As a result, he was overthrown in a coup backed by both the United States and Britain. The U.S. then installed the Shah, whose dictatorship lasted until the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Since then, Iran has remained firmly outside U.S. control, prompting the U.S. to impose crippling sanctions on the country's economy. These sanctions have devastated Iran's currency and hindered their ability to import critical goods, including life-saving medicine. Despite these challenges, Iran has shown remarkable resilience. The country has become largely self-sufficient by developing many products on its own. They have also pursued alternatives to Western partnerships, with China's Belt and Road Initiative and joining the BRICS network. Iran has also been a vocal critic of Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people, leading them to armed resistance groups in Palestine, Yemen, and Lebanon. As a result, Iran stands as the largest and last remaining obstacle to Israel's total dominance in the region. And with Trump in office, Israel finally had a U.S. president willing to greenlight and support their offensive strikes on Iran, aiming to take out the final domino. Israel didn't just strike military targets, but extended targets to police stations, telecommunications, and other civilian infrastructure with the intention of causing regime change. But these attacks only emboldened the Iranian people, rallying them behind their government. Israeli and U.S. intelligence were under the false impression that all Iran needed was a slight push, and the Iranian people would overthrow their government for them. They believed the same thing in Iraq in 2003, where they thought the Iraqis would welcome them as liberators, but instead faced a decade-long insurgency. Western arrogance is in full display when they bomb a country, claiming they're doing it to help the people. While it is true that there is discontent in Iran, especially among younger generations, the simple truth is that changes have already happened in the country, and modern-day Iran is very different from what Western media wants you to believe. Just look at this footage that went viral across social media, showcasing a side of Iran that most Westerners never see. Modern streets, ladies walking around scarfless, or with a scarf on their shoulders. Nearly 70% of Iran's science and engineering graduates are now women, and in the medical industry, men made up 70% of the country's medical students and physicians about 20 years ago. But women have reversed the situation and now account for 70% of Iran's medical students. Yet Western leaders claim to want to help these women by killing them daily in Iran and Gaza. Iran has its problems, but change should always come from the people within the country. You cannot bomb or impose regime change to create lasting transformation. History has shown time and time again that this only leads to death, destruction, and instability. In response to the illegal attacks on its sovereignty, Iran launched a 2-week-long missile assault on Israel. These strikes revealed the failure of Israel's Iron Dome and caused significant damage to Israeli infrastructure and the economy. Currently, both countries have agreed to a very fragile ceasefire, but many geopolitical analysts believe that this conflict is bound to flare up again in the future. It's only just a matter of time. This is because Israel's overreaching objectives have not been achieved. They will not stop attacking Iran until there is a government subservient to Israel. And this is where the concept of Iran acquiring a nuclear deterrent becomes crucial. The only reason Israel is able to act with such aggressive tactics is because it is the only actor in the region with nuclear weapons. If Iran were to obtain a nuclear weapon, it would completely alter the geopolitics of the region. The theory of mutually assured destruction, MAD, comes into play. This principle maintains peace by establishing that if one country uses nuclear weapons to destroy the other, both will be obliterated in the process, a lose-lose situation for both. The threat of this outcome keeps countries from provoking a conflict, and this is arguably the primary reason the US and Soviet Union never went from a cold to a hot war. It's also a large reason why the US has not launched a direct military conflict with China despite ongoing hostility. And you don't have to look at superpowers to see nuclear deterrence in action. The same logic applies to smaller states defying US influence. Let me give you 2 real-world case studies that illustrate how nuclear deterrence works. First, let's look at Libya. Under Muammar Gaddafi, Libya once had the highest quality of life in all of Africa. Gaddafi was an anti-imperialist and pan-Arab leader. Although he ruled with absolute power, his policies led to a significant improvement in the living standards of the Libyan people. He prioritized redistributing the country's resources, like its vast oil reserves, to benefit his people rather than Western corporations. As a result, universities, healthcare, and electricity were all free. This is the same crime that led to the overthrow of Iran's former leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, in the 1953 coup. Understanding the danger of opposing the US, Gaddafi began developing a nuclear weapons program to ensure Libya's regional power and independence. In 2003, after witnessing the invasion of Iraq and the fate of Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi agreed to abandon Libya's nuclear program. But this proved to be a fatal mistake for Gaddafi, who met a violent and brutal death as a direct result. Western-backed rebel groups and a 2011 NATO bombing campaign turned Libya into rubble. A country that once boasted the highest quality of life in Africa now has open-air slave markets. For over a decade, Libya has been a failed state, torn apart by endless conflict and instability. The West, however, doesn't care as long as Libya is no longer a threat to Israel. If Libya had not given up its nuclear program, there's almost no chance the West would have dared to launch such a bombing campaign and interfere in Libya's internal affairs. And this brings us to the second case study, North Korea, which, interesting enough, the United States government has left alone over the years. The US cannot engage with North Korea in the same way it does with other countries, because it knows that North Korea has the ability to respond proportionally to any provocations. As a result, the US largely ignores North Korea, focusing on strangling it economically with sanctions. Despite North Korea's ideological opposition to the US, the nuclear deterrent has kept it alive. Without it, there's a high likelihood that North Korea wouldn't exist today. Libya and North Korea serve as case studies for the two different paths Iran can take in response to being a prime target of the West. America has proven that the only way for a country to gain genuine respect as a sovereign nation is through a nuclear deterrent. Without it, you are not truly sovereign. Your existence depends entirely on Washington's view of your country. Now, if you argue that Iran should not have nuclear weapons, you must first explain why Israel, or even the US, should be allowed to possess them. What makes a country qualified to have a nuclear weapon? The logical criteria should be rationality and peacefulness, yet both the US and Israel are objectively warmongers. Since October 7th, 2023, Israel has carried out more than 17,000 attacks across 5 countries, including the occupied Palestinian territory, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iran. Israel is also approaching 2 years of committing genocide against the Palestinian people, the most heinous crime a nation can commit. The death toll is estimated to be around 100,000 people, with some estimates putting secondary deaths in the hundreds of thousands. Israel also launched an illegal first strike on Iran, which is a violation of international law. Only 4 countries in the world have refused to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT. Those countries are North Korea, India, Pakistan, and of course, Israel. In addition, Israel does not cooperate with the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, who seeks to promote the peaceful use of nuclear energy and inspect military usage. Israel refuses to allow these inspectors to examine its nuclear facilities, which remain shrouded in secrecy. In contrast, Iran as a modern state has never initiated a war. It is a member of both the NPT and the IAEA, and has passed frequent and thorough inspections of its nuclear program. Iran adhered to the successful Iran nuclear deal until the US unilaterally withdrew, further undermining trust in the negotiations with the US. Iran has also consistently proven itself to be a rational actor. After the United States illegally assassinated its top general, Qasem Soleimani, during Trump's first administration in 2020, Iran understood that it had to respond to preserve its sovereignty and national dignity. In the face of an illegal act of aggression, Iran chose pragmatism. Instead of escalating to direct conflict, Iran fired missiles in the desert near an American military base, warning the US in advance to ensure that no one was in harm's way. They repeated this strategy in June 2025 in response to another illegal provocation, where the US launched bunker busters on Iranian nuclear sites. Iran warned the United States ahead of time and targeted empty land near American bases. These are the actions of a clearly rational actor. It requires immense patience and rationality to respond to blatant aggression in such a measured way. The US essentially begged Iran to retaliate, but Iran didn't take the bait. Iran now has every motivation to acquire a nuclear weapon, and it's clear why. A nuclear weapon has proven to be the only way to have sovereignty respected, and the only real deterrent against further aggression from Israel and the United States. Warhawks advocating for regime change in Iran want you to believe that if Iran were to obtain a nuclear weapon, it would immediately launch it against Tel Aviv or New York. But this makes no sense whatsoever. It would take years for Iran to develop even a small number of weapons, and the only purpose for acquiring nuclear weapons will be to deter further aggression, not to strike first. If Iran were to initiate a nuclear first strike, it would ensure its complete annihilation by the US. As a result, its obvious and stated intentions are only to acquire a small number of weapons for deterrence against further Israeli aggression. History has proven Iran to be unaggressive and rational. Everything used to falsely portray Iran ironically describes Israel perfectly. Iran is painted as a theocratic regime, the main cause of instability in the region and the largest state sponsor of terrorism. In reality, Israel is run by a fanatical theocratic government. Its leader Netanyahu has even said the world would go down with Israel. Israel is undoubtedly the largest destabilizing force in the region, having launched wars against every single one of its neighbors, and unfortunately dragging the United States along with it. And lastly, Israel has sponsored numerous terrorist attacks, including detonating explosive pagers and radios in public markets, killing multiple children, an attack described by UN experts as a terrifying violation of international law, and recently setting off car bombs in civilian neighborhoods in Tehran. Every accusation is a confession. While Israel's military dominance in the region allows it to manipulate the political landscape, Iran remains steadfast in its defense of its independence. The pursuit of a nuclear deterrent is not an act of aggression, but a rational response to the systematic threats it faces from Israel and the US. The way forward must involve a recognition of Iran's legitimate security concerns and a move towards a more balanced, peaceful approach to the Middle East. Only then can we hope to break the cycle of violence and instability that has plagued the region for decades. Iran's nuclear ambitions, far from being a cause for alarm, could be the key to a more stable and secure future, not only for Iran, but for the entire region. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's deep dive into this complex situation.
Right, so for decades, the Gulf monarchies have played their roles dutifully. American oil partners, Israeli back channels, and guardians of a Western-defined regional order in the Middle East. That order is breaking down. Israel's unchecked militarism, America's waning reliability, and Iran's rising deterrent power, as now ably demonstrated by 12 days of retaliation following that unprovoked Israeli strike, have made neutrality not just attractive for those states caught in the middle, but essential. A new script is being drafted, if you like, not in Washington or Tel Aviv, not in the interests of the US and Israel, but in Jeddah, in the interests of the likes of Saudi Arabia and Iran. Trump and Netanyahu are going to be hating every last bit of this. The oil-rich states seeking closer alignment with a nation they hate. But the key word here is neutral. The Saudis and their ilk are not seeking to take sides, but will they be seen to be doing that anyway by an administration as unhinged as that of Israel? Right, so this recalibration by Gulf monarchies, as much as Israel might be hating the prospect, it is all their own doing. It can be traced directly to that most recent bust-up between Israel and Iran last month, when Israel carried out that unprovoked airstrike on Iranian nuclear facilities, sparking a rapid Iranian retaliation that culminated in strikes across Israel. The significance of this strike was not merely military, it disrupted trade, paralyzed Israel's port operations, and underscored Iran's credible regional deterrent. Its escalation had a chilling effect on Gulf capitals, so. With their US bases strewn across their territories, monarchs from Riyadh to Abu Dhabi understood that another round of escalation could pull them into a conflict they'd not chosen to take part in. Iran's display of restraint, calibrated retaliation, not maximalist war, convinced Gulf leaders that Tehran was now a force that could not be ignored or dismissed. But that show of restraint also implied this was a force that could be negotiated with too. These are mostly businessmen we're talking about here, after all. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's visit to the Saudi city of Jeddah was emblematic of this recalibration now that a ceasefire between Israel and Iran is in place. Meeting with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan, and Defense Minister Khalid bin Salman, Araghchi's talks were described as fruitful, with a focus on regional security and stability. This is not the beginning of an alliance, though. Rather, it marks a strategic hedge on the part of the Gulf state. The Gulf monarchies, especially Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, are adjusting their policies to reflect the realities of a shifting Middle East. After decades of outsourcing security to the United States and some of these states pursuing normalization with Israel, though not all of them, the Saudis, for one, are still holding out on that, Gulf leaders are now recognizing the need for a more autonomous foreign policy. They are no longer willing to just be caught between an erratic US administration and an increasingly rogue Israel that the US keep arming no matter what they do. This recalibration is not without risk, though. The United States still maintains a vast military presence in the Gulf. Riyadh and Abu Dhabi rely on American arms, intelligence, and diplomatic cover. Any overtures to Iran threaten to antagonize Washington, and it doesn't take much to antagonize Donald Trump, after all, does it? Israel, too, views Gulf-Iran rapprochement as a betrayal. For Tel Aviv, Iran is an existential threat. Just 2 weeks after their nuclear sites were struck, Netanyahu is once again saying Iran are just 2 weeks away from having a nuclear weapon, just as he's been saying for the last 30 years, and Donald Trump is easily stupid enough to pull the same trick twice. Normalization with the Gulf, cemented under the Abraham Accords, was intended to isolate Tehran. Saudi-Iranian diplomacy threatens that idea entirely. An Israeli retaliation of one sort or another may well come again as a result. Domestically, Gulf rulers face sectarian contradictions here. For decades, Iran has been demonized in Sunni majority Gulf societies. Shia populations in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia's eastern province are viewed with suspicion. Re-engaging Iran risks empowering these communities, challenging both political control and ideological narratives. The Gulf's recalibration is underpinned by long-term structural shifts that go far beyond these short-term crises, though. These developments are transforming the architecture of Middle Eastern power relations and forcing Gulf states to reconsider their traditional alliances. One of the most critical drivers is the strategic retrenchment of the United States, because for decades the US was a de facto guarantor of Gulf security. Its military bases in Qatar and Bahrain and Kuwait, along with its naval dominance in the Arabian Gulf, were seen as absolutely unshakable. Over recent years, proven otherwise. The US response to the 2019 Aramco attack, for example, when the Houthis of Yemen, though Iran were accused as well, hit Saudi oil production, basically halving it for a short time. Well, the US response to that was minimal. Then there was the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, its inability to prevent Israel from dragging the region into war, actively enabling it to do so, in fact. And its shifting focus to greater power competition in the Indo-Pacific of deeply unsettled Gulf rulers. What was once a dependable patron to them is now being perceived increasingly as inconsistent and transactional. This has led to a strategic awakening in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi and beyond, that the United States can no longer be the sole pillar of their security. Another major shift concerns Israel, who were once embraced by Gulf leaders as a stabilizing force and a counterbalance to Iran, much to the chagrin of their Arab inhabitants. The Abraham Accords signed in 2020 symbolized a realignment rooted in shared hostility towards Tehran and a desire for technological and economic collaboration. But Israel's increasing militarism, particularly its genocide of Gaza and the unprovoked attack against Iran, have made it a liability. Gulf states are now rethinking whether a deeper partnership with Israel really serves their long-term interests. The domestic cost is also high. Normalization is widely unpopular amongst Arab populations for the aforementioned reasons, especially even worse now after the horrors broadcast from Gaza, of course. For Saudi Arabia, the cost of normalization now outweighs the benefits, and any momentum toward formal ties have all but evaporated at this point. In contrast to that, China is emerging as a more reliable, neutral broker in the region. The 2023 Beijing brokered rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran was a diplomatic watershed. China's interest in regional stability is purely economic, not ideological, which is why they are dealing with Iran to the extent they are, even arming them now, as I spoke about in a video yesterday. China wants safe shipping routes, reliable energy supplies, and peaceful markets for its Belt and Road initiative. This suits Gulf monarchies well. Beijing does not demand alignment with its foreign policy. It offers investment and infrastructure in exchange for stability. That's it. Gulf leaders are increasingly leaning towards a multipolar foreign policy model balancing US security, Chinese investment, and regional autonomy, if that's a balancing act that's actually achievable. Iran's inclusion in this framework, though, is now being widely seen to be a pragmatic move, therefore. Destabilized Iran threatens Chinese interests just as much as Gulf ones. Their fortunes are therefore now tied together. Economic pragmatism further reinforces this recalibration. Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, the United Arab Emirates' post-oil diversification plans, and Oman's economic modernization all depend on regional stability. Iran's strategic location at the heart of Eurasia makes it indispensable to regional connectivity initiatives, such as the International North-South Transport Corridor. Gulf monarchies recognize that excluding Iran from economic integration is simply no longer tenable. Trade, tourism, infrastructure, and energy cooperation require a baseline of peace and predictability. With Western-led corridors like IMEC under threat due to Israeli involvement, Iran-backed routes offer an alternative model grounded in regional geography rather than Western strategy, which is not seen as nearly as beneficial any longer. And that's especially true since the IMEC hub of Haifa has been decimated by Iran as it has been. Again, all Israel's own doing. They only have Netanyahu to blame for that. During his Jeddah visit, Araghchi reportedly proposed expanding Gulf-Iranian coordination on maritime security, energy transit, and anti-terrorism cooperation. And while these proposals remain broadly aspirational, they represent a shift from US-led security frameworks to more regionally owned models. This is not a Middle East NATO we're talking about here, but it is a step towards something more akin to a West Asian Helsinki process, a forum for de-escalation, confidence building, and an ongoing dialogue. Saudi Arabia is positioning itself as a broker here, not a battleground. The UAE, too, continues trade with Iran while maintaining ties with Israel, walking a fine line between those competing poles. A regional security architecture inclusive of Iran offers them several advantages. It enables Gulf monarchies to proactively manage threats from militias, pirates, and non-state actors. It could reduce arms races, lower military budgets, and open diplomatic pathways to resolve ongoing flashpoints. It also allows the Gulf to regain narrative control, presenting itself not as a passive victim of superpower games, but as an actor in its own right, capable of shaping its own destiny. There are issues nonetheless. There are some internal contradictions that remain unresolved to this dream of an idea, as I might have ended up presenting it at somewhat inadvertently, but get to the caveats here. How does Riyadh, for example, reconcile outreach to Tehran with its war on Yemen that's still ongoing? On pause as that technically is, though Saudi-backed militias are still very active within Yemen. How does Abu Dhabi justify trade with Iran while hosting Israeli intelligence assets too? There's still some incoherence still that needs to be resolved if ties are to become more formal, but there's no guarantee things will ever reach that point. It may just still remain with these Gulf states, broadly speaking, sitting on the fence when it comes to both Iran and the US and Israel. Further complicating matters is the possibility of US or Israeli sabotage to all of this, because who would bet against that? If Iran continues to gain strategic depth, Israel may seek preemptive action. Not again. They'll be 30 minutes away from a nuclear weapon or some such Netanyahu notion. Ayatollah Khomeini's got one under his robes. I've seen the bulge, or words to that effect. In such a scenario, Gulf leaders would be forced to abandon their fence-sitting and pick a side, potentially undermining years of diplomatic groundwork one way or another. Public opinion, of course, is another destabilizing variable. If Gulf populations perceive rapprochement with Iran as empowering Shia communities or betraying Palestinian solidarity, domestic unrest could follow. Likewise, appearing too close to Israel in the aftermath of Gaza may provoke backlash among youth populations fed up by injustice and occupation. How can all this be resolved then, Damo? Well, there's several plausible ways this could work out. It could shape the trajectory of this Gulf-Iranian relation idea, plan, thing, and the broader regional order that goes with that. One possible scenario is the gradual institutionalization of a Gulf-Iran security compact. This would involve formal or semi-formal mechanisms for maritime deconfliction, coordinated anti-piracy operations in the Red Sea, and diplomatic consultations on conflicts such as that with Yemen. Under such a model, Gulf states and Iran could stabilize trade routes, lower tensions, and create a framework for crisis management that reduces dependence on external powers. You might think, well, that sounds a little bit ambitious, but this actually already has historical precedent in the regional forums of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and also in the post-Cold War era when you look at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. The second scenario involves a kind of cold peace, if you like. Gulf Iranian diplomacy continues at a tactical level where it is now, basically where it is now, with incremental progress in trade and cooperation, but no deep strategic alignment. The Gulf would continue to fence it, essentially, balancing Iran against Israel and the US while keeping dialogue channels open to all. Such a model offers some flexibility, but it remains vulnerable to shocks. An even more hardline Israeli government would be a bit of a shock. Such a thing possible. Or an aggressive US Middle East policy towards Iran could disrupt the balance too. In this framework, Gulf monarchies maintain independent agency, but at the cost of constant recalibration and policy ambiguity that could create further problems going forward. The third and worst scenario is a breakdown of the rapprochement full stop due to provocation or political change, or pressure applied to the Gulf states by the US and Israel that ends up biting. This could be triggered by another and far worse Israeli-Iranian exchange, exactly what Benjamin Netanyahu is after currently in the US, of course. False flag operation, like a Gulf-targeted Houthi attack misattributed to Tehran. We know the kind of things they could do, don't we? The rollback of the Jeddah process could polarize the region once again, forcing Gulf monarchies to recommit to the US-Israel axis and reignite confrontations across the region again. This scenario would not only derail economic visions like Saudi Vision 2030, which is the last thing the Saudis want, or the UAE's diversification plans, it would also destabilize global energy markets and maritime trade too. It fundamentally doesn't suit anyone except Benjamin Netanyahu. What unites all of these possible outcomes, though, crystal ball gazing, as you could accuse me of doing here, I suppose, but they make sense to me. It's the central role of agency. The Gulf is no longer being acted upon, it is acting itself. The future will be shaped not only by the provocations of others, but by the decisions made in Riyadh, or Abu Dhabi, or Doha, or Muscat. And whether these decisions lead to peace, paralysis, or peril will depend on the Gulf's capacity to align national interests with regional stability and to defend its diplomatic gains against the pushback of past alliances. The Gulf's shift towards rapprochement with Iran poses a strategic nightmare for Israel, though. For decades, Israel's regional strategy has been predicated on isolating Iran, forging covert or overt alliances with Arab states, and positioning itself as a bulwark of Western security interests. The Abraham Accords were not merely diplomatic trophies for Donald Trump, they were foundational to Israel's regional containment strategy against Tehran. Now, with Saudi Arabia, the most influential Arab state, openly engaging with Iran, the very foundation of Israel's strategy is under threat. First, the erosion of anti-Iran sentiment dilutes Israel's ability to bring Gulf states to their viewpoint by painting Iran as that existential threat. If Gulf states increasingly treat Iran as a partner rather than a pariah, it weakens Israel's justification for aggressive military policies, including preemptive strikes and targeted assassinations, as we've already seen them doing during that 12-day conflict. This undermines Israel's diplomatic leverage with both Washington and Europe, which often rely on Arab silence or complicity to justify their own alignment with Israeli security doctrine. Second, the collapse or stagnation of normalization talks, especially with Saudi Arabia, represents a major political setback for the Netanyahu government. Normalization was to be the diplomatic capstone of this foreign policy legacy, offering regional legitimacy in exchange for technological and security collaboration. Instead, the optics of Arab leaders embracing Iranian diplomats, while Israeli bombs fall on Gaza and Haifa comes under Iranian fire, signal a diplomatic reversal of some significance. And third, Israel now faces a more diplomatically empowered and less isolated Iran. If Iran can count on Arab neutrality, or worse, active diplomatic engagement, during times of conflict at that, as Netanyahu is clearly attempting to paint the current situation despite the current ceasefire, Israel will be forced to reconsider the costs of confrontation. It may lose its ability to act with impunity, knowing that its aggression could now alienate not only Tehran, but its own supposed Arab allies. And finally, the shift threatens Israel's economic ambitions too. With Red Sea security under question and Gulf connectivity projects pivoting eastwards towards Iran-linked corridors, Israel risks being sidelined in regional trade routes. The economic fallout of that could further compound the strategic isolation Tel Aviv now faces as a result of its strikes on Iran. In short, the Gulf-Iran rapprochement flips the Israeli security doctrine on its head. Israel finds itself increasingly alone, the very thing it wanted for Iran, unable to compel regional consensus and facing a Middle East where former allies are now carving their own paths, ones that do not require Tel Aviv's blessing. The Gulf monarchies are no longer content to be clients of Washington or silent partners of Tel Aviv. The Arab-Shia Mohammed bin Salman meeting in Jeddah symbolized a new doctrine that sovereign diplomacy rooted in regional realities is the way. This is not an ideological pivot. Things are nowhere near that far along at all. But it is a pragmatic recalibration by Gulf states towards Iran in mutual interest. If successful, this strategy could transform the Gulf from a zone of proxy wars and foreign bases into a hub of peaceful cooperation. If it fails, the consequences will be dire. More war, economic collapse, and political upheaval. But for now, the Gulf monarchies are choosing agency over obedience. Their challenge is to prove that a balanced region-first diplomacy is not only desirable, but durable in the face of a volatile and often vindictive geopolitical landscape, still dominated by the US and its proxy in Tel Aviv. More on how Iranian ties with China are giving Israel a still larger economic headache, and which leads in nicely to China's growing Gulf influences too. Check out this video recommendation here as your suggested next one. Please do also hit like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all
surprise, another massive cover-up by Donald Trump in Iran that we are able to expose here at the Midas Touch Network. Do you remember that after Iran launched a retaliatory strike against an American military base in Qatar, launching 14 ballistic missiles at this Al Udeid Air Force base that America has in Qatar, that Donald Trump said that all 14 ballistic missiles sent by Iran were shot down successfully by the United States of America? He said, we shot them all down. Well, now we're learning that that is false. At least one of the ballistic missiles was able to strike its target at the Al Udeid Air Force Base in Qatar, controlled by the United States, and it hit a geodesic radar dome that houses very sensitive communications by the United States military. It was a direct hit, and the Trump regime tried to cover it up. We've been following the satellite images, and we've been comparing and contrasting the images on June 23rd when Iran launched its retaliatory strike against the United States following the U.S. strike against Iran. So if you take a look right here, look close, you can actually see the area where the ballistic missile hit from Iran into this Air Force base. Now you take a look at the left side, look at the split screen here, the before and after shot, take a look right here, and you can see where that geodesic dome, that radar dome was, again, that houses all of this very critical communication infrastructure for the United States at this base. It cost at least $15 million. There was a direct strike there by Iran. And again, this was covered up. And why do I say it was covered up? Well, here's Donald Trump in one of his recent pressers. And here he is basically saying, well, look, Iran told us they were coming. They said that they told us what time, and we shot down every single one of their missiles. You now can see that that is 100% false. But here's what Donald Trump said. Let's play it.
And, you know, we were at the end, 14 missiles we shot, and every single missile was shot out of the air. It was pretty amazing. That was sort of the end. And they told us they were coming and where they were and what time they were coming. And they said, if you'd like to have a different time, we'll do that. And that's respect when they do that. I appreciated that they did that. There was no surprise. We got the soldiers out of the base in Qatar in this case, but they knew they were coming. 14 missiles were coming.
And here's what Donald Trump said at a rally that he did in Des Moines, Iowa. Play this clip.
And you saw that just the other day where the missiles are being shot down one after another. You know, they called me to tell me they have to take a shot at us. This was Iran, very respectful. That means they respect us. Because we dropped 14 bombs, they said, we'd like to take 14 shots at you. I said, go ahead, I understand. They said, where they'd do it. I said, good, we emptied out the fort. It was a beautiful military base in Qatar who treated us really fantastically well. And they said, sir, 1 o'clock, okay? I said, it was fine. We could make it later. And we had nobody but 4 gunners. We had 4, they call them gunners, and they shoot the Patriots. They shoot the missiles up. It's hard to believe.
And here was Donald Trump giving a speech about what went down. And Donald Trump talked about how he spoke with someone from Iran, and they coordinated it together to hit an American military base. I mean, could you imagine if former President Biden, former President Obama was out there saying, yes, we invited Iran. We said, sure, go and attack our military base. Here, play this clip.
15 missiles were shot at us the other day. And they were very nice. They gave us warning. They said, we're going to shoot them. Is 1 o'clock okay? They said, it's fine. And everybody was emptied off the base, so they couldn't get hurt except for the gunners. They call them the gunners.
So here's how some of the intelligence observers are reporting this as well. The Pentagon has now had to confirm for the first time today, since the attack occurred, that at least one short medium-range ballistic missile fired by Iran was able to evade air defenses and impact the Al Udeid air base in Qatar during the Iranian attack against the base on June 23rd. In a statement to Air and Space Forces magazine, Pentagon chief spokesman Sean Parnell stated, one Iranian ballistic missile impacted Al Udeid air base on June 23rd, while the remainder of the missiles were intercepted by the U.S. and Qatari air defense systems. This report goes on to say, after he said that, it goes on to say, while not directly denying any impact, U.S. officials in the days and weeks after clearly attempted to downplay the Iranian attack lightly in an effort to not disrupt the swift ceasefire. And this is where, no, because Donald Trump lies about everything. That's why the United States downplayed it, because the United States systems did not fully work as planned. And they should have been honest with the American people right away is what should have went down. By the way, Remember, the Pentagon spokesperson was also the person who was saying, a few weeks back, that Iran would indeed be able to rebuild its nuclear program in about a year to 2 years. Remember, he's like, well, I think the thinking that we think is, the problem when you tell lies all the time, like the Trump regime does, it's hard to keep your lies straight. Just a reminder, here's what he said here. Play this clip.
Our assessment of the battle damage around Fordo, Nantes, and Isfahan remains unchanged. I mean, we believe, and certainly all of the intelligence that we've seen have led us to believe that those facilities especially have been completely obliterated. And the interesting kind of side point about this, Tara, is that all of the conversations that we've had since Operation Midnight Hammer with our allies all around the world, but certainly also in the region, they say a couple of things. They share our sentiments about, the degradation of Iran's nuclear program and the fact that we have degraded their program by 1 to 2 years. At least intel assessments inside the department assess that. And I think their intelligence shares that conclusion.
Assessments by this department think it's been degraded or delayed by 1 to 2 years?
I think we're thinking probably closer to 2 years, like degraded their program by 2 years.
And folks, I want to go deeper into the cover-up from the Trump regime as well. But I think it's important that we have media literacy, right? And that we understand our sources of news to make sure we're getting accurate news. I mean, I'll just give you an example right here. The State Department is gutting like 15% of its workforce. Somewhere between 1,300 to 2,000 employees are going to be fired. No one on the right wing is talking about this at all. 0 right-wing media sources, or 15% right-wing media sources, are talking about it as they attempt to downplay Trump dismantling our security infrastructure, diplomacy infrastructure. I use Ground News to do my research. It's an essential tool to help me see through what's really going on in the media ecosphere. Go to ground.news/MTN or scan the QR code. We're giving our viewers 40% off of Ground News' top tier Vantage plan is what I use. That's how I do my research. It'll give you unlimited access to everything I use. Ground News is subscriber funded. They don't rely on ads that could introduce bias, and subscribing to Ground News supports our channel. And it supports our independent work that we do here. Go to ground.news/MTN. Again, I think it's important that you know the research tools that I use. Ground.news/MTN. Get that 40% off. All right, going back to the videos right here as well. I think it's important to also mention one of the things that we've learned from Israeli intelligence. This is from Israel's intelligence, just so you know, right? So we know Europe's intelligence says that Iran's able to build a nuclear weapon again pretty soon if they wanted to. We knew our own intelligence suggested that the United States strike on Iran's bases like Fordo and the other two were not as successful as Donald Trump and the regime claimed it was going to be. It wasn't obliterated. Set back, damaged, degraded, sure. But the regime, Trump used the word obliterated, they're done, right? And Donald Trump's like, well, there's nothing to see here and do here. We won. The war's over. We won. And it's like, that's just simply not what happened. Israel's intelligence agencies have concluded that some of Iran's stockpile of near bomb-grade uranium survived the American strikes. That's according to Israeli officials. Now, I want to talk about this other cover-up in the region as well involving Iran. So Iran funds the Houthis in Yemen, the terrorist group, the Houthis, which has been destroying all of these commercial ships and has really been terrorizing the Red Sea and preventing commercial shipments in that area. And so you all remember Signalgate, which the Trump regime's like, it's okay. Those weren't classified war plans. That involved America strikes on the Houthis. Remember, we lost, 6 to 8 Reaper drones. We lost 2 fighter jets, hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. And then remember, Donald Trump said, I've entered into a ceasefire with the Houthis. They're incredibly brave and great people, these Houthis. Great people, big fans of them. Remember he said that? And I was like, what the hell is happening here? This was back in May when he was congratulating the bravery of the Houthis. Here, watch this.
We had a very good outcome with the Houthis, and we honor their word. I mean, they made a commitment, and we dealt with other countries that were close to them and their surrogates and we honor all of their words. We'll see what happens, but I think, I believe that hopefully that's over with, and they'll leave the ships alone. Just leave those ships alone. But so we do. We take their word for it. It was, we hit them very hard. They had a great capacity to withstand punishment. They took tremendous punishment, and you could say there's a lot of bravery there. That it was amazing what they took. But we honor their commitment and their word. They gave us their word that they wouldn't be shooting ships anymore, and we honor that.
Well, just even over the past 24 to 48 hours, we've seen the Houthis attacking multiple cargo ships in the region. 14 Filipino sailors are still missing 48 hours after the Houthis fired on the Greek-owned Magic Seas cargo ship with sea drones and rocket-propelled grenades. 4 sailors already confirmed dead, on track to be the worst Houthi Red Sea massacre to date. Yemen's Houthis also released a video showing what went down. And then at least 4 crew members from another ship, the Eternity Sea, were killed, and 15 others are missing as well. Multiple ships, multiple deaths going on right now in the Red Sea. And this is after, remember what the Trump regime said about the Houthis in Yemen, totally obliterated, degraded. Cargo ships are going to be able to freely pass through the Red Sea. Not happening, another cover-up. And you heard what Donald Trump said there. So I'll remind you of Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's testimony, and Democratic Congress member Moulton really put him in his place here. Play this clip.
You talked about the success of the Houthi operation. About how much money did it cost? How much money did you spend on missiles shooting at the Houthis?
Well, you'd have to compare that with what it cost.
I'm just asking how much did it cost?
Divert our shipping lanes around.
I'm told it's several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion. How many U.S. flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration,
the answer is 0.
Military vessels transit.
No. I didn't ask about military vessels. I asked
which would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
for
how many commercial vessels?
Transit.
It's been several weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have transited the Red Sea?
Would you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships?
The questions are not to me,
military
Mr. Secretary.
ships?
They're to you.
We have responsibly put military.
The answer is 0. I reclaim my time.
So it's important that we know the facts, folks. We give you the facts here at the Midas Touch Network. Do with them what you want. But that's the facts. You see the geodesic radar dome, the radome, just clobbered, and that was covered up. And now the Pentagon had to admit it. And we hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers.
The truth is more important than ever. Check out.
On July 10th, at 11 a.m. Moscow time, a high-profile murder took place in the center of Kiev. Later, it turned out that an unidentified assassin had eliminated the colonel of the security service of Ukraine, Ivan Voronik, with 5 shots from a pistol with a silencer. This video shows the very moment of the murder of a high-ranking Ukrainian officer. Reports indicate that the killer managed to escape from the crime scene in a sport utility vehicle. It is reliably known that the deceased colonel of the Security Service of Ukraine was responsible for organizing sabotage and terrorist acts on the territory of Donbass and the Russian Federation. Furthermore, numerous Ukrainian sources have confirmed that Colonel Ivan Voronik was one of the organizers of Operation Spiderweb, which destroyed several Russian Tu-95 strategic bombers. Amid all this, many experts have suggested that the physical elimination of this colonel could be the revenge of the Russian special services. However, one should not rule out the possibility that Ivan Voronik was killed by his own colleagues. The fact is that large sums of money are flowing through the security service of Ukraine and other law enforcement agencies of this country from so-called Western sponsors. Against the backdrop of the distribution of Western financial aid, a real struggle exists between high-ranking Ukrainian officers. They literally devour each other for the right to possess tens of millions of dollars, coming every month from Western countries. By the way, in 2023, the shooting down of a helicopter carrying the Minister of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Denis Monastyrsky, was the result of just such internal squabbles by law enforcement agencies of Ukraine. Meanwhile, over the past 24 hours, new details have emerged about Russia's recent massive missile strike on military installations of the Ukrainian army and NATO forces in western Ukraine. My dear truth seekers, let me remind you that on the night of July 9th, dozens of Russian ballistic and hypersonic missiles, together with 750 kamikaze drones, rained down on military installations in the western part of Ukraine. Mainly, military air bases in regions such as Khmelnytsky, Lviv, Zhytomyr, and Volynsk were subjected to massive missile strikes. By the way, in yesterday's video, I described in detail the consequences of this massive missile attack, as a result of which the French forces suffered serious losses in the Zhytomyr region. And now, 48 hours later, new details of this Russian missile attack have emerged. So, on the evening of July 11th, numerous Ukrainian and Russian sources confirmed that during this massive missile attack, Western and Ukrainian monitoring services began to record a large number of anomalies. In particular, they admitted that during the Russian missile strike, the monitoring services began to lose Russian missiles on their radars. According to them, during the recent Russian missile strike, Western and monitoring services were unable to track the flight of even one missile. It is reported that once the Russian missiles entered Ukraine's airspace, they immediately vanished from radar screens. All this indicates that Russia continues to test its latest electronic warfare systems in the Special Military Operations Zone. Furthermore, as you know, Ukraine lost another F-16 fighter a week ago. It is noteworthy that the Kyiv authorities recognized the loss of this fighter jet and the death of an experienced pilot. Back then, Ukraine officially declared that this F-16 was lost during an attempt to shoot down the Russian kamikaze drone. The official version says that the pilot allegedly lost control and crashed. However, numerous influential Western and Russian experts, citing their sources in the Ukrainian General Staff and the Russian Military Department, said that on the day Ukraine lost its next F-16 fighter jet, the Russian army was testing the latest KS-172 air-to-air aircraft rocket. This missile was designed for combat aircraft such as the MiG-31, and is capable of hitting moving targets at a distance of up to 400 kilometers. Even Western experts admit that this unique missile is superior in its tactical and technical characteristics to aircraft missiles such as the American AIM-120D and the Chinese PL-15. It is noteworthy that even Ukrainian sources admit the fact that this latest Russian missile shot down an F-16 fighter jet of the Ukrainian Air Force. However, the bad news for NATO and the Ukrainian General Staff did not end there. As it turned out, the Russian army has also begun testing its latest Tu-160M strategic bombers and new generation KHBD cruise missiles in the Special Military Operations Zone. This cruise missile is considered to be low observable and capable of hitting targets at a distance of 6,500 kilometers. In particular, a few hours ago, sources in the Russian military department confirmed that during the recent massive missile strike on Ukraine, the latest Russian strategic bombers fired about 10 of the latest KHBD cruise missiles towards the Ozerny military airbase in the Zhytomyr region. As a result, 5 IL-76 cargo aircraft and 2 American C-130 Hercules military cargo planes were destroyed. My dear truth seekers, let me remind you that the North Atlantic Alliance has been actively using this military airbase since February 2016. Thus, as you can see, Russia continues to successfully test its latest weapons in the Special Military Operations Zone. And judging by how events are developing, we will witness the successful testing of the latest Russian weapons systems many more times.
We start with breaking news. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said after a meeting with Lavrov that Washington had heard proposals on Ukraine from Moscow that had never been made before. It is unknown what they were talking about, but Rubio said that he would present a report to Trump today and pass on the Russian proposal. Today it became known that Washington will not supply Kiev with Patriot, something that Zelensky had so strongly asked Trump for. Rubio mockingly suggested that Europe take a creative approach and give its air defense to Ukraine. And the main mystery of the meeting between Rubio and Lavrov is who winked at whom and what it means. During the protocol shooting, one of the journalists shouted out about anti-Russian sanctions. Rubio and Lavrov remained silent, but the head of the State Department winked at Lavrov. Neither diplomat made a statement at the beginning of the meeting. At the same time, Rubio winked at Lavrov after the journalist shouted out a question. Most likely, Lavrov and Rubio probably discussed sanctions, since this is the main topic. After all, the President and Congress are considering sanctions against Russia. This meeting is taking place against the backdrop of strained relations between Moscow and Washington. And this has been developing for several months, and in recent days, we have often heard criticism of Putin from the US president. This is the second official meeting at the level of heads of foreign policy departments since Donald Trump came to power, and this is the first meeting since the US resumed arms supplies to Ukraine. Rubio will take with him a brand new proposal from Moscow. Rubio's press approach is now starting to feel like a ritual. Trump is unhappy.
I express the same feelings as the president. Disappointment and dissatisfaction with the lack of progress in peace talks and in finding a way out of the situation. Therefore, we continue our interaction. We exchanged ideas and opinions, which I will pass on to Washington this evening. Perhaps we will be able to build something on them. It was a frank and important conversation. It took place. We also discussed other topics.
Would you characterize the ideas that were put forward today as new ideas from Russia that the Trump administration has not heard before?
Yes, I think so. Yes, that is true. I believe that this is a new and different approach. Again, I would not say that this is something that guarantees peace, but this is a concept that we will all convey to the president today.
Lavrov left the meeting without comment.
A thorough synchronization of watches was conducted on the entire spectrum of issues on the bilateral agenda for in the situation in the world. There was a substantive and frank exchange of views on the settlement around Ukraine, the situation around Iran and Syria, a mutual commitment to finding peaceful solutions to conflict situations, restoring Russian-American economic and humanitarian cooperation. Unimpeded contacts between the societies of the two countries was confirmed, which, in particular, could be facilitated by the resumption of direct air traffic. The Trump administration is very contradictory in its actions and statements. This does not make the work easier. Nevertheless, we are persistently and consistently pursuing a course to move towards normalizing our relations. There are, I would call it, sanctions efforts in Washington. That cannot be discounted. But by and large, threats of new sanctions have already become commonplace for us. Of course, this is an important moment, but not a determining one. We know how to resist sanctions.
According to Politico, the U.S. president himself is trying to amend the document in order to retain the right to determine when to impose sanctions and when to lift them.
Donald Trump is ready to sign the bill on sanctions against Russia, but only if it is amended to give the president more control. In principle, Senator Lindsey Graham's bill is open for discussion, but it must preserve what the White House considers the president's exclusive right to control U.S. foreign policy. The current version of the bill allows the president to waive a 500% tariff on countries buying Russian oil and uranium for up to 180 days. Graham said he agreed to amend the bill to allow the tariff to be waived a second time, subject to congressional oversight.
The U.S. Secretary of State has provided clarity on arms sales to Ukraine for the first time amid the wrangling of the past 3 days. This is the previous arms package agreed upon by the Biden administration. There are no plans for new deliveries yet, and they can't find the Patriot. And even if they find it, then it still won't save Ukraine.
There are several countries in Europe that have Patriot batteries, and they could share them with Ukraine, and we are actively working. We are negotiating with countries on this matter. Are there any specific countries? Well, the Spanish have one. They are quite far from Ukraine, but they have one battery. The Germans have one too. There are other countries. I'm not singling them out. I'm just saying that these are the 2 Patriot batteries that I know of. There are other Patriot batteries. There are other possibilities. There are countries that have ordered Patriot batteries, and they're about to get their shipment. It would be great if one of them would agree to delay their shipment and send it to Ukraine. We're looking for creative ways to get Ukraine these defensive weapons that they need, and that won't help them with drone attacks. They're using completely different methods to shoot them down.
According to the New York Times, Moscow will be launching thousands of drones in a single strike by September. The previous record was set last Wednesday, when 728 attack drones flew to Ukraine. So there's no military solution for Ukraine, but Kiev hasn't come to that conclusion yet.
I am confident, and I am speaking more as an old fox who has seen a lot in diplomacy, and, in fact, more than any of the current Europeans in power, that a ceasefire and peace in Ukraine will be achieved if a personal meeting takes place between the Russian and American presidents. So, the phone will not help here. Negotiations are necessary. They will sit down opposite each other, and then we will most likely see a ceasefire. If this does not happen, then the war will continue for many, many months.
The United Aircraft Corporation has delivered a new batch of Su-34 multi-role fighter bombers to the troops. These aircraft, manufactured under the State Defense Order, have replenished the fleet of operational tactical aviation of the Russian Air Force. The Russian military-industrial complex is increasing its capacity. The superiority of the Russian army on the battlefield is growing, and therefore Putin is confident that Ukraine's defenses will be broken through in the coming months. The New York Times writes about this. Some sources close to the Kremlin told this American newspaper that the Russian president is unwavering. He believes that ending the conflict without serious concessions from Ukraine is impossible. And so the Russian army continues to advance. From the Krasnolamansky direction, there are reports of the liberation of Zelenaya Dolina. Now Russian military units are advancing on a broad front on Srednaya and Kolodyazy. A little further south, the Russian army has made progress in the Seversk area. It is reported that its suburb is less than 1 kilometer away. The Kiev regime is pulling its reinforcements to this section of the front. In the Konstantinovsky direction, the flanks of this strategically important city, which is essentially the southern gate of Ukraine's main stronghold in the Donbass, are being encircled. The agglomeration of Konstantinovka, Drushkovka, and Kramatorsk. And some miracle happened in the Council of Europe. There, they suddenly woke up and unexpectedly paid attention to the lawlessness committed by Ukrainian military registration and enlistment offices. The Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights Michael O'Flaherty released a report on abuses during the Kiev regime's mobilization. The document states that human rights violations have become systematic and widespread. Among them are violations, beatings, brutal detention, denial of access to a lawyer, detention without communication with the outside world, and the mobilization of people with disabilities. O'Flaherty noted that he also receives reports of torture in military registration and enlistment offices, and deaths. The author of the report demands that the Ukrainian authorities immediately conduct an investigation, introduce independent control over the mobilization procedure. Of course, the Zelensky regime does not plan to do this. Instead, new cannibalistic ideas are being heard in Ukraine. Former People's Deputy from the Svoboda Party, now deputy head of one of the recruiting centers, Shveka, said that Ukrainians, who rejoice at Russian strikes on military registration and enlistment offices, should be treated as prisoners and used for forced labor in frontline cities. Another Nazi, former company commander Vaidai Daiki, came up with a similar idea. He accused the authors of all comments approving of Russian strikes on military registration and enlistment offices of treason. These people, as he put it, decided to be on Putin's side. A verbatim quote from Banderas Daiki: "We must judge them or immediately destroy them as enemies." Ukrainian children are also taught to be merciless to the enemies of the Ukrainian Reich. In the so-called military patriotic camps, which, of course, are more reminiscent of the Hitler Youth, they are taught to handle weapons. And at the same time they are instilled with the correct ideology, according to the Nazi instructors. In particular, they teach them to read the prayer of the Ukrainian nationalist, the text of which exactly 100 years ago the Banderates from the OUN were required to memorize. In Rome, a meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing has started with a sensational debut. For the first time, representatives of the United States sat down at the negotiating table, as reported by Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. The American delegation was headed by Special Representative for Ukraine Keith Kellogg and Senators Graham and Blumenthal. The same authors of the bill on 500% duties on all buyers of Russian energy resources. Our path is clear. It is support for Ukraine. Strengthening sanctions, Meloni solemnly declared, standing next to Zelensky. The Coalition of the Willing itself, created by Britain Keir Starmer in March of this year, resembles the Dreamers Club. 30 countries are discussing a peacekeeping mission and the restoration of Ukraine after a war with no end in sight. As Reuters notes, so far the only real achievement of the summit is beautiful photos against the backdrop of Roman palaces. And literally just now German Chancellor Merz addressed Putin. He said that Europe will definitely not give up. And Macron, following the results of a conversation with Putin, which took place a week ago, said that now he realized that Putin will not give up either. And he will definitely not stop.
Judy. Thank you for the information you provide me during the week, and thank you for letting me pick your brains now. Larry, to you first. Why do you think Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has visited the White House and Capitol Hill 3 times in the past 6 months during the presidency of Donald Trump?
Well, this time is to lock down more aid because they were devastated by what Iran did to them over the course of those 12 days. That's number one. Number two, to try to see, take the temperature of Trump face to face and see if he can get him convinced to make another go at Iran. I don't think they're finished at all. Trump for his part, maybe one explanation for why he's going so hard after the judges in Israel who are hearing the case involving Netanyahu's corruption is that if he can get Netanyahu off, so to speak, and then get Netanyahu convinced to move forward with the ceasefire, because Trump is, he's keen, man. He wants that Nobel Prize, so he's going to do anything he can. And so maybe to that extent, there's some additional negotiation. But listening to Netanyahu at the end of the trip, I think Netanyahu got everything he wanted out of Trump.
Ray, I think Larry's correct. Netanyahu was as tenacious as ever, and I think as manipulative as ever. What is your take as to how to justify 3 meetings? Actually, more than 3 meetings. It's 3 trips. This trip alone had 3 meetings with Trump, only 2 of which were partially on television.
I think, Judge, it has to do with internal politics in Tel Aviv or West Jerusalem. Netanyahu needs every chance to show that Trump is backing him 100%. And these trips help that to the degree that Trump sort of ratifies that. And this is, let's face it, this is Netanyahu's strongest hand. He has the backing of the President of the United States. And I think that was mostly why he came. The serving of or giving him the copy of the Nobel Prize, well, my God, one war criminal giving a Nobel Prize nomination to another one. I mean, that was a little bit too much to take, but we have to laugh these things off. Otherwise, we die crying.
Right. Larry, is there any analysis you can share about the timing of Netanyahu's trip and the decision of the Justice Department, both occurred on the same day, to do a 180 on the Epstein files? The Justice Department, the Attorney General said they were on her desk while Netanyahu's here. Maybe I'm reading more in this than there is. I don't know. That's why I want your thoughts. She and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino announced there's no enemies. There's no client list. We never had one. There's nothing to reveal.
Yeah, you mean you don't believe in coincidence? Jeez. God almighty. Look, the client list does exist. It's been admitted to by others. Ryan Dawson has compiled it, not by just sitting down and coming up with names out of his own mind, but he actually read through all the court transcripts, all the witness statements, all the charging documents, and he was able to come up with a list of 78 people that include folks like Jamie Dimon, Robert Kraft. Now,
you published that list on your website, did you not?
Yeah, it's Sonar 21. Now, note, there are billionaires on that list. If Ryan was putting their names out and saying, hey, they're on the Epstein list, and he'd be sued if it was false. So that's why he hasn't been sued by one of them. That tells you a lot right there. I also learned this week from my business partner who has brought a tax case against the Clinton Foundation that he received from one of the Scandinavian countries a flight manifest from Mr. Epstein, and on that plane, Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, and James Comey. They flew from the island up into one of the Scandinavian countries. Now, what were they doing? I don't know. Maybe attending a chess tournament. Who knows? But the point is, the this administration, they're not protecting Donald Trump, because I tell you, if Trump was on that list, do you think the Biden crew would have let that, kept and protected that? Oh, absolutely not. They would have destroyed him with it. But two things are going on. One, protecting this as an Israeli intelligence asset. And number two, there are friends of Donald Trump on that list. He may not have even paid attention to it before, but once he saw his friends on that list, he said, I'm not going to let him be ratted out. But I think it had more to do with, as a Mossad asset with some CIA involvement, very likely.
Ray, was Epstein a Mossad asset, and would the Mossad use sexual blackmail to control public policy of a country?
Yes, and certainly yes. They've done it in the past. Benunu was captured, or sort of a honeypot sort of operation. The fellow who revealed with photos what the Israelis were doing with respect to working on an atomic bomb. So yeah, it's part of the tradecraft. I'm not sure. I would have to say that not only Israelis do this sort of thing, but this is done by virtually all intelligence services.
What, do you know the extent of, from your friends in intelligence, Epstein's activities with Mossad? Was he an agent? Was he an asset? Was he paid? Did they have damaging information on him to the point where he was forced to work for them?
Well, obviously, someone paid him big bucks.
Right.
Now, I don't know who exactly that was, but if you put in perspective all the people that profited from his operations, the Israelis in the first instance, and all those fellows that had this great time on that island in the second one, they never thought that they would be blackmailable. That's really stupid. Why else would they be given these favors? But somebody paid and somebody got him killed. I mean, it's pretty clear, huh? It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Somebody got him killed in that prison. So will this come out? Well, hopefully it will. Maybe Kash Patel is going to pursue this like a bulldog, but maybe not. We'll just have to see.
It doesn't seem like it. No. Dr. Michael Baden, who's the world's foremost pathologist, and a friend of mine from testifying before me, and used by the government over and over again, has testified under oath that there's no way under the laws of physics that Epstein could have broken his own neck in the manner in which it was broken. Larry, will Israel ever be at peace with its neighbors until they're all reduced, unless they're all reduced to the status of Libya or Syria?
No, it's impossible, because the entire premise of Zionism, which emerged in the late 19th century, is it really is. It wasn't a religious.
Oh, wait a minute, Larry. Ted Cruz told Tucker Carlson that the references to Israel in the Old Testament were to the country governed by Benjamin Netanyahu today. I had to get that in there. I know you know this. Go ahead.
Yeah, he forgot to understand that first promise was to Abraham and to all nations. And gee, if that promise is to Abraham, that means the Arabs, the Muslims as well, are blessed under that.
Correct. Islam is an Abrahamic religion. Go ahead, Larry.
So he just doesn't know his Bible very well. But that's what's the absurdity of all of this, that this political movement that came out of basically Europe, and with Theodore Herzl as the big advocate, who was not a religious, he wasn't a religious Jew. They premised this entire thing that God gave this land to us, but we don't believe in God. So I'm going, yeah, how does that work? That's like being a secular Christian, Yeah.
So there's never going to be peace there, and they're never going to be self-sufficient. They are counting on Donald Trump and subsequent Donald Trumps to continue to provide them with aid at the expense of the American government. Did you know that Netanyahu flew home with 2 jets that Trump gave him from the Air Force? I didn't know the president could just give away Air Force jets, Ray McGovern. Did you?
Well, did he have a foot on each one? Was he astride the two jets? Netanyahu is pretty agile. No, I think it's ridiculous. And it really is a matter of time, I think. The latest polls show that a lot of Americans don't like genocide. A lot of Americans are seeing the photos coming from Gaza. A lot of Americans, much fewer than 80%, that Netanyahu bragged about having. 80%, he said, 80% of the Americans will support us no matter what. That is absurd, end quote. Well, it was absurd then when he said it 25 years ago. It's even more absurd now. He's below 50%, in my view, if you take a nationwide poll of those who know what's going on in the world. So that's the change. That's a salutary change. It's just that it's coming so damn slow that hundreds of thousands of more Palestinians are likely to be killed in the interim.
Larry, and I forgot to run this, so we're going to back up to Epstein for a minute. And I know you're of the belief, and rightly so, that Trump's name is on it, or the Biden DOJ would have revealed it. But when Pam Bondi, the attorney general, was asked by a reporter at a cabinet meeting what became of the client list, before she could answer, the president said this.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
President. I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein.
In February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And that's it on Epstein.
Well, Marco Rubio, like he's watching a tennis match between the two of them. I couldn't help but noting that. Let's move on. Larry, how do you explain, speak about tennis match or ping pong, how do you explain aid to Ukraine? On again, off again, on again, increased again. That's what we've seen in the past 2 weeks with Trump.
This kind of erratic behavior, I think there's something mentally wrong with Trump. And in fact, I've spoken to, I without revealing my source, somebody who has had frequent meetings with Trump over the last 18 months, said that in these last meetings, he's noticed a noticeable change related to age. And when you listen to Trump talk, he talks in this monotone, like he's Rain Man, with some sort of autistic disease. But to play these kinds of games with the weapons and with war in Ukraine, Russia's just laughing at him because they recognize they're not going to get a serious deal. So they know the game. Praise him. Tell him he's wonderful. Say, hey, man, we think you too should get the Nobel Peace Prize. But the Russians are going to keep doing what the Russians are doing. They're going to defeat the Ukrainians. But did you see the other day that there were 4 Iskander missiles that hit Kiev? Trump sending 10 Patriot missiles. Each, you have to fire 2 of those Patriot missiles to try to take out one Iskander, which they can't do. But the point is, in that 1 minute, with 4 rockets coming in, you would have used up 80% of what Donald Trump is sending. So, wow. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's just absurd theater.
Ray, before you jump in on this, and of course I want you to, watch this. Chris, cut number 11.
Are you planning to send more weapons to Ukraine?
We're going to send some more weapons. We have to. They have to be able to defend themselves. They're getting hit very hard now. We're going to have to send more weapons. Your defensive weapons, primarily.
Mr. President, you have sent more weapons to Ukraine, as you said last night. Last week, the Pentagon paused some shipments of weapons to Ukraine. Did you approve of that pause?
We want to put defensive weapons because Putin is not He's not treating human beings right. He's killing too many people. So we're sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine, and I've approved that.
So who ordered the pause last week?
I don't know. Why don't you tell me?
Sir, yesterday you said that you were not sure who ordered the munitions halted to Ukraine. Have you since been able to figure that out?
Well, I haven't thought about it because we're looking at Ukraine right now and munitions, but I have not gone into it.
What does it say that such a big decision could be made inside your government without you knowing?
I would know. If a decision was made, I will know. I'll be the first to know. In fact, most likely I'd give the order, but I haven't done that yet.
What's the Kremlin think, Ray McGovern, when they see the American president speaking like that? I mean, this is beyond what Larry's colleague has described.
Well, Judge, I'm sure that the Kremlin has its own equivalent of what we used to have in the CIA, at a distance psychological profiles. And I'm sure they've come up with results similar to what Larry mentioned before. The man is erratic. The man may be sick, but he's the guy that they can deal with. The only guy they can deal with for the next 3 years. And they've said, oh yeah, when Trump says, oh, I am not happy with Russia, I'm not happy with Mr. Well, the reaction from Putin's spokesperson is, yeah, well, the president of the United States is erratic and not always consistent, but we're operating on a tougher plane, on an overseer plane. We want to develop relations. Now, what's the proof I would adduce? Well, just yesterday, Rubio meeting with Lavrov in Kuala Lumpur. They met for an hour, and what was the readout? It said, well, Rubio, here's what Rubio says. The Russians have a new and different kind of suggestion on Ukraine. I'm going to bring that back to the president. It's something like a step-by-step approach, like a roadmap, says Rubio, okay? And the whole thing is described by the Russians as a mutually respectful dialogue on a growing range of issues of mutual interest. So all I can say here is that the Russians are aware that this guy may be a little bit deranged. He's the only fellow they can work with. The Russians have the upper hand in Ukraine. They don't need to rush. They need to see what Trump is willing to do in terms of getting Ukraine behind him so he can move on to bigger and better things, my God, in the Middle East and in China, with respect to China. So all I'm saying here is it's become increasingly clear that even though Trump says every other day, I'm really not happy with those Russians, the Russians just dust it off and say, look, we think the guy is serious. We're going to test that out. But in any case, we're winning. And we're just to see how much of a deal we can cut so that we don't have to take over the whole country.
Larry, are the neocons in his administration finally triumphant?
Yeah, I'd say so. They're getting everything that they want at this point. It's unfortunate that Trump likes to think of himself as being Reagan-esque. Reagan, with all of his faults and flaws, he actually did a good job of selecting good people in positions, whether you got Caspar Weinberger as Secretary of Defense, George Shultz as Secretary of State. I mean, I'm not saying that you agree with their policies, but at least they were intelligent, thoughtful.
Schultz was a giant.
But, Trump's got a clown show going on. Yeah. He doesn't, he made his money, part of his money on television, pretending that he knew how to hire and fire people. And yet, look at what he's done. Just the lack of quality between the likes of Hegseth and Marco Rubio. They're not even in the same league. But he is, I'm afraid, continuing to follow their line. If he had a clear vision about being Mr. Peace, he would have cut off all the weapons flows. He would have cut off the intelligence cooperation and would have brought an end to this war there, as well as in Palestine. But instead, he enables the genocide in Palestine, and he allows this war to continue.
Ray, if Rubio said that Lavrov gave him a new version of things. Rubio was naive. The Russians have had the same 5 or 6 conditions, beginning with no NATO and ending with no military from the beginning. What could Lavrov possibly have said that Rubio thinks is newsworthy or different and worthy of transmitting to the president, unless Rubio, who's not been part of the negotiations because Witkoff has, is first now exposed to this?
Well, Judge, we'll have to see, won't we? Rubio's got a new set of suggestions from the Russians. He thinks it's interesting enough to mention to the press that he's going to take them back to the president. And he says, it's really kind of funny. It's a step-by-step kind of a roadmap. Well, hello, that may be naive. That's the way you do these negotiations. Now, I'm not saying that the Russian terms have changed. They haven't, and they won't, because the Russians are winning. What I am saying is that if the neocons were completely in control, there would be no talks with the Russians. There would be no Trump reaching out to say, oh, I'd like to meet or talk to Putin again. There would be no hope on the Russian side that they could make a deal. The deal is there in the offing. It's going to be heavily favored in Russia's favor, of course, and it's going to take another month before the Ukrainian army collapses. But the deal is there for the making, and I have to make sure that people realize that at least I differentiate between the Dr. Jekyll and the Mr. Hyde. The Dr. Jekyll on Ukraine, Trump I'm talking about, of course, and the Mr. Hyde that enables genocide, for God's sake, and worse, in joining a war aggression against Iran. So, I'll take the Dr. Jekyll, and I think that's the attitude that Putin has. He's the only guy we have. We're talking to him. Rubio talks to Lavrov, and Rubio says, whoop, wait a second, here's some good suggestions. I'm going to take that. So, let's not prejudge this. Let's see what Rubio comes up with, or what the president says. Well, that's not a bad idea. I hadn't thought of that step by step. Oh, well, that's interesting. Before we prejudge the thing and say that the president is really not realistic, or he's dumb, or he's hemmed in completely by the neocons.
But Larry, the neocons will never accept anything less than a Russian military evacuation from eastern Ukraine. That is not only unrealistic, it's impossible.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Look, Lavrov had an interview last week with Magyar Nemzet, a Hungarian news outlet, and he gave the strongest, clearest outline of what Russia's position is, and it hasn't. The only thing that's changed from what Vladimir Putin presented on June 14th, 2024, is that he's now that the West has got to recognize that Crimea, Sevastopol, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson are. In fact, this is what he said. He said, there must be international legal recognition of the new territorial realities following the accession of Crimea, Sevastopol, the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, as well as the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions into the Russian Federation. So, and on the agenda are the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, lifting of anti-Russian sanctions, withdrawal of lawsuits against Russia, and return of illegally frozen assets in the West. That's what Rubio heard.
Well, wait a second. Larry, what's the date of what Lavrov said that you quoted? What's the date?
It was last week. It was like
okay. Well, I'm
July
talking
4th.
about yesterday. I'm talking about yesterday.
Ray.
He talked to Rubio yesterday.
No, absolutely not. I spoke with Lavrov. Judge and I both spoke with Lavrov. He doesn't go out and say this and then come out and say something different from that. Are you kidding?
Of course he does. In private, he tells
Oh, no.
Rubio exactly what Rubio said. Yeah, look,
no.
When you
talk to Rubio, let's entertain the possibility that Rubio's lying.
Well, why would he lie about this?
Why wouldn't he lie about? He wants to put.
Larry,
He'll put the spin on it, Ray.
Larry, when you talk to Lavrov, what exactly did he tell you?
He didn't say. He said exactly what's in this message. He said exactly what's in this message.
He told us the same 6 conditions that President Putin said in 2022, which Larry just articulated.
Yeah, I'm not talking about when you and Larry were together in Moscow. What I'm talking about was Larry was there alone. And he reported that Lavrov said something to him 3 times, and where there's no justification for that because the video was on all that time, and Lavrov said no such thing. So if we're talking about what Love says,
Listen,
we
Ray,
can say what he
Ray,
said 8 days
Ray,
ago. Now we say what he said.
You're wrong on this, Ray.
Okay, then show me the proof. Show me the video.
I just showed you the proof right here with the 3 paragraphs that Lavrov said to the Hungarians, and he repeated it at BRICS. You've been traveling. You haven't had a chance to read this or watch it.
That's their going in position, Larry. What he said to Rubio yesterday is what Rubio is reporting back. That's different. You know, you can't go with the old thing. Of course, they're going to go with the maximum position. What I'm saying here is that Love said something different to Rubio yesterday. And Rubio and the readout from the Russian side said this is a very respectful.
All right, let me jump in.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Let me jump in. I'm watching 2 of my closest friends, comrades, colleagues who have advised me over the years, and each of whom appears twice a week or more on this show, disagree with each other. The audience loves
We respectfully disagree.
Yes. As JFK said, we will disagree agreeably. So on that, we will finish, gentlemen. Have a great week.
Somehow, he didn't have any connection to anybody else. What are the odds?
This is the worst cover-up of my lifetime, the Epstein
so far
case. The reason I'm talking about it so much is because if you can get away with this, you really can get
yes, exactly. It is a litmus test.
Away with anything. If the government can tell people to not believe what they just said a few months ago and have everyone be fine with that, that's just a level of gaslighting that I refuse to be a part of. Never forget, they just promised us names in the release of the Epstein files.
Breaking news right now. You're going to see some Epstein information being released.
What kind?
A lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information.
But in this case, in Epstein's case, it is incredibly disturbing. We have flight logs, we have information, names that will come out.
Is it going to be shocking?
I don't see how it's not shocking that there were so many individuals that were hidden and kept secret.
Coffee said nothing during Joe Biden's 4 years. He's a partisan hack. I think that it's fair to criticize Joe Biden for not talking about this, but it's also fair to say that Joe Biden didn't run on the platform of declassifying this. I think both things are true.
Not been held accountable.
Yeah, well, apparently there are no names to be given. No list, no blackmail. Epstein has now been pushed as a lone trafficker. It's the lone trafficker theory, guys. Essentially, the government's memo that they just released contradicts everything we've seen before. And now basically implies that Epstein was trafficking to himself.
Right.
And Ghislaine Maxwell was trafficking to Epstein. And there was no other blackmail or trafficking going on.
Nobody had any idea that this was happening at all. Nobody knew. Nobody was part of it. It was just him. Wow. That's crazy.
Memo essentially implies his wealth and his power then would be just from his skill as a New York financier.
I'm talking about Jeff Epstein, the New York financier.
Basically, he was the world's greatest tax advisor by day, the world's greatest trafficker at night to himself. And the rich and powerful people who all flocked to him and to his island had no idea of this double life. That really is kind of the heart of the modern theory, is that just all Epstein by himself. And then his friends just were there for his tax advice, despite not being a tax professional.
Yeah, they flew to his island on the Lolita Express so they could get advice on their taxes. What the fuck is going on?
or a lawyer. Not only that, another huge revelation.
Oh my
is the
God.
fact that really the government has increased the number of victims and decreased the number of perpetrators, right? We had the
logical entropy.
Idea that there were these other perpetrators for a while, that they were just redacted because the government was building cases. Now we got pretty clear statements that there isn't evidence to bring future cases on third parties. But if you look at the original 2019 indictment, it says dozens of victims. This is from Ken Klippenstein. But the Epstein review says over 1,000 victims.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference. How'd that happen? Over 1,000 people, it was all just one guy. That's crazy.
So what happened, guys? And by the way, in the interim, they also increased the number to 200 to 250.
200 victims. 200. So we have well over 250, actually.
So we went from dozens to 200 to over 1,000.
And here's the thing. These inconsistencies are very well documented. Everybody understands them. They have this account. And if you pull up this account right here, so this rapid response account constantly goes around and they clarify and correct and communicate different types of misinformation that's being spread. Why aren't they doing that with these files? If there are so many of these misconceptions going around and it would be so easy to clear them up, why is it that you keep disproving this bullshit, but you can't seem to do any time doing the disproving of the important thing? I wonder why. This is some 1984 shit. There's no mainstream coverage of this. It doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter because the videos of this content are getting more views than the mainstream media. And I want to say, guys, I appreciate it because a lot of you guys are the reason for why that's happening. Do you think Trump is really in the Epstein files? I don't know. Neither outcome would shock me. Him not being in it or him being in it, neither would shock me.
In the span of basically a year, in terms of victims, we like 10x the number of victims, but now there's no perpetrators. Like the perpetrators have been reduced. That is the crazy thing about what they're implying here, what this lone trafficker theory is pushing forward. It's also strange because previously Epstein, in a court filing, is said to have provided information to the FBI as agreed upon. Case agent advised that no federal prosecution will occur in this matter as long as Epstein continues to uphold his agreement with the state of Florida.
And what agreement
so apparently
is that?
There was some deal where Epstein was providing information to the FBI. What information? We don't know because...
So why don't we know that? Why don't we know that? I feel like that's kind of a pretty big one, huh? Damn.
No one else was involved. There's also the simple fact that if you go to the FBI records, what they call the vault, most of the files are just heavily redacted. So the idea that we got some transparency wave is literally a joke. Yes, it is true. It
is transparent because you can see right through the text into the white background. The text is 100% transparent.
Epstein list where there's like names written down. They weren't lying. But names exist in documents, on videos, in images, and they're all redacted. What's going on here? They're going to say, oh, it's all for the victims, right? But it's not all victim names. In addition to that, this lone trafficker theory is already on shaky grounds when you think about Prince Andrew's settlement.
Who's paying Prince Andrew's $16 million settlement to Virginia Giuffre?
With Virginia Giuffre, where he paid $16 million to make civil sexual assault.
So there's civil sexual assault allegations. And who's that in the background? Oh, that's right. That's the woman in jail for trafficking women to Jeffrey Epstein. Huh. What are the odds? That's crazy. Wow.
$1 million to make civil sexual assault allegations go away. Now, of course, it's worth saying that he did not admit to guilt. This was a settlement, but that is what...
True, but come on, what are we doing here? What are we doing?
what you're always going to have with these rich and powerful people.
Yeah.
In the same way, you also have Leon Black, who reportedly paid $158 million over 5 years to Jeffrey Epstein for tax advice. And guess what? Leon Black.
What? So he paid $158 million approximately for what Black contends was services rendered and values received. Well, the problem is that about what services that was. That's the issue. It's about what services rendered. What does that mean? Was it tax advice or was it something else?
To Jeffrey Epstein for tax advice. And guess what? Leon Black, billionaire, also paid the U.S. Virgin Islands $62 million in cash as part of a settlement, a non-prosecution, where they wouldn't go after him for anything from, quote,
do you remember what I said yesterday about how when you have $100 million, you unlock a new talent tree, and whenever you have $1 billion, you unlock an extra multi-classing ability? Do you remember whenever I said that, you know, everybody, oh, you're closer to Donald Trump or these billionaires than we are? I don't think you realize the levels that these guys fucking operate at. This is insane.
Any and all claims of any nature whatsoever, specifically related to Jeffrey Epstein. It's worth noting that $15 million of this cash payment will be going to counseling programs and activities or mental health services. You also have Jess Staley, the former boss of Barclays. He directly admitted to having sex with a member of Epstein's staff.
Which one? I mean, the staff, like, so, yeah, I don't know about this.
Which you would expect if someone was running a trafficking operation.
This is what I think Trump should do. This is my best case scenario. Trump releases all of the files, all of the names, all of the people, redacts the victims, and just says, yeah, we're not really sure which ones of them are pedophiles and which ones aren't. Yeah, we don't know. Just straight up. That would be, yes, the purge, yes. Yeah, just putting it out there. Yeah, I don't know, but, you know, it could be these guys. Control yourself. Yeah, that would be the most obvious. That would be, why would he release himself? He would be on the list too. Yeah, no, you're right. Pure fucking chaos. As I said, what have I said many times?
So I just have to say that there was a statement that this was entirely consensual, and I'm not saying anything about that. I'm simply saying the idea that Epstein was just trafficking for himself is unlikely to be true, in my opinion. Later, Staley wrote to Epstein, "Say hi to Snow White." Epstein replied, "What character would you like next?" Staley responded, "Beauty and the Beast." And then Jeffrey Epstein said, "Well, one side is available."
Again, the title of this video is "The Worst Cover-Up of My Lifetime." This is crazy. They're not even trying. They're not. That's what's so insane about this. They're not even trying. It's so bad. Yeah, they're not even trying to hide it.
Obviously, some type of coded message. You can read into that for yourself. But all of this is public. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what makes the government's memo so infuriating. Is so much reporting has already been done. These settlements with powerful figures under denials, yes, but also under very questionable circumstances, make just a complete denial and statement that all of this was just Epstein impossible to believe. In September 2009, Epstein also emailed a woman named Irina to tell her that Jess Staley is staying in the Berkeley Hotel in London tonight. Staley emailed Epstein the next day to say, I should have taken your offer.
What the fuck is going on? This is insane. Who is Trump so scared of in the world that he's scared to release the files? I don't think that he's scared. I don't think scared is the word. I think that he doesn't want to release the files because it will implicate potentially himself and other people that he's aligned with and friends with. I think, though, Trump should realize at this point, bro, you survived an assassination attempt. Like this is like, if there is any point that like you have some sort of fucking authority to just do the right thing, the fact that you are alive says that. Two of them, well, the second one wasn't direct, to be fair. And there's probably like 50 of them that we just didn't even hear about. So, Petrified, yeah, just fucking do it, man. You shouldn't even be alive right now. Just do it. Oh, it's going to ruin all my friends' lives. That sucks. Too bad. Do it anyway. Fuck them. They had no problem roaching out on you after January 6th. And whenever you started becoming president, they flipped the script on you. No, fuck that. Fuck them. Do it anyway. They don't give a fuck about you.
According to the Times. There's also this book by one of the 60 Minutes correspondents called A Ticking Clock.
I think your assumptions are wrong.
Where he says that he met with Ghislaine Maxwell, and he said, I want the tapes. I said to Maxwell at a table at Regency Bar, I know he was videotaping everyone. I want the tape of Trump with the girls. She didn't deny the existence of the tapes, but said, I don't know where they are.
I don't know where they are implies they exist.
Apparently replied, ask Epstein, and she gave him a stern look and pointed a finger at my face. I'm the daughter of a press baron. I know the way you people think. If you do one side, you must do the other. If you get tapes on Trump, you have to do Clinton. Now,
great idea. Yep, these conditions are acceptable. You're telling me we get 2 in 1? Oh my God. I didn't think we could be so lucky. We're about to get a hard reset? Yes.
Again, what you make of a third-hand source like this, talking to Ghislaine Maxwell, who apparently doesn't deny that some of these tapes exist. Was she even telling the truth or just playing some game? Either way, this was all known about, not just by people after the fact, but allegedly by people during the fact. This is from Mark Epstein. It's sourced from Jeffrey Epstein. Quote, if I said what I know about both candidates, they'd have to cancel the election.
This is Jeffrey Epstein's brother. What the fuck is going on? How is this happening? This is so obvious, so dark shit happens. Why are we so surprised? The issue isn't that it happens. I'm not, like, yes, stuff like Jeffrey Epstein has been happening ever since the dawn of time. But it's the fact that it's happening in plain view and it's being protected. I'm not upset. In a way, I'm upset that it happened. It sounds bad to say that I'm not upset that it happened. Of course, it's bad that it happened. But the real conversation here is about why it's not being dealt with, basically.
That's what Jeffrey told me in 2016. So not even Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell allegedly were claiming this was all just between them. They were constantly insinuating that there were compromising things on various powerful people.
Why can't we make these people testify? Why can't we make them give up the names? I don't understand why we don't do that. Fifth Amendment. The right to avoid self-incrimination. To testify against themselves. This isn't about themselves. Yeah, they can't self-report. That's fine. Yep. Time to tweak the law. Yeah, no, that's what it says. Yeah, that's clearly what it says. And also, by the way, if we can't force them to testify, there's no way that this was happening completely domestically, which means that there are probably other countries in the world that we could extradite them to that don't have the Fifth Amendment. Now, what would I do? That's a good point. Oh, yeah. Russia, wherever. Is there a precedent for this? Seems like a perfect time. Most countries have something similar. Well, that's okay. You only need to find one that doesn't. Yeah, and this is what's so annoying about this. You're telling me the CIA and Guantanamo Bay was able to make those clowns stand on boxes looking like scarecrows while they're being electrocuted. You can waterboard people. You can torture them nonstop. But the only people that you can do this to are a bunch of random fucking terrorists in the Middle East. And we can't do it to one of the most prolific human traffickers of all time. Really? This is bullshit. This is bullshit. Where is the dark CIA? Where's the deep state when you need them? It's bullshit. The pussies. Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe this is too far. That sounds like bullshit to me. The one time we need them. The one time.
Funny is that Trump himself, even before he was in a position to declassify this stuff, had accused other powerful people of doing these things.
Bill Clinton.
Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island.
Why would you say this? Why would you say this?
Jeffrey Epstein. That island was really a cesspool. There's no question about it. Just ask Prince Andrew.
You also have the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was in touch with other convicted pedophiles.
How convenient. Wow. Also, the problem is being on a flight log alone doesn't prove anything, and people's speculations alone also bring no consequence. Then release everything. In my opinion, this might sound like, again, I do think that the way that I solve most problems is very barbaric, but I think it works. When you have an infection on a limb, sometimes you can't cure the infection and you have to sever the entire limb, even though there are cells inside of that limb that are not infected. Put out the information, put it all out, don't redact anybody's name, and sever the limb. That's what I think they should do.
Larry Nassar, he was writing letters. So the idea, once again, that he was just by himself, off by himself, doing things on his island by himself and then taking calls with people like Bill Gates simply for philanthropic advice really pushes the bounds of belief.
Somebody says y'all want blood so bad you're turning your back on a patriot? How? I'm not against Trump. If I was against Trump, I would just be saying that like he's wrong and I wouldn't be advocating for him to do anything. The reason why I'm saying this is because I think there's a chance that it can happen. Like the reason why I'm pushing for this is because I think that there is a critical mass that you can make this stuff come out with. And the reason why I'm talking about it a lot and pushing it a lot, the same with coffee, is because we are trying to reach that critical mass. That critical mass is what got Trump elected in the first place.
Forget a close associate of Bill Gates was named a fallback executor on the will of Jeffrey Epstein, which he, by the way, said he was shocked by and he deeply regrets meeting Epstein.
Wow.
Bill Gates has said similar things to that effect. Of course, Bill Gates fraternized with Epstein after he was convicted of crimes. Previously, he told the Wall Street Journal, I didn't have any business relationship or friendship with him. But in fact, he met multiple times with him at his Manhattan townhouse.
Once. Wait. Oh, Coffee, you didn't read the next sentence. Once staying late into the night. Gentlemen, I think we may have a problem here. And I think we might have a little bit of a situation. I don't know if you heard, but Kash Patel and Dan Boingo are considering resigning now. I'll look at it after this.
Manhattan townhouse. Now, once again, I have to say real quick, all of these people are innocent until proven guilty. All of them deny doing anything untoward.
That's true. They are innocent. That's right. And I think that they're so innocent that they should come forward and testify in front of Congress, in front of everybody, televised, and just lay it all out. Like, did we really make the Patriot Act for nothing? Like, don't we get to cash in on our deep state surveillance state stuff? Like, you have all these logs, you have all these phone recordings. You tapped everybody's phones. You've got everybody's internet logs. You've got everything. Just put it out there.
But my point is, there are already too many associations to make the lone trafficker theory make any sense. For example, Jean-Luc Brunel was somebody who apparently trafficked a bunch of people to Epstein, who himself abused a bunch of women and even was charged for it. He was charged for some really awful things. And then
drugging and raping a 17-year-old girl. I see. And then on February, Brunel was found dead in his jail cell, and then he allegedly killed himself. Huh. Wow. I'm sure not noticing a pattern here.
Later found dead in his cell. Interestingly, Epstein was actually a financier of Brunel's modeling agency, where a lot of this alleged abuse happened. So once again, the idea of the lone trafficker just doesn't make sense because Epstein's directly linked to another guy who is also abusing women.
Yes.
So after all of this, they're really asking you to believe the unbelievable. They're asking you to not believe what they've said about this case, both out of office and now in power. They're asking you to not believe public reporting linking Epstein to other known files. They're asking you not to believe suspicious circumstances regarding settlements of powerful people. They're asking you to believe that Epstein was just the greatest tax advisor and financial advisor on the planet that all of these billionaires needed to consult, despite the fact that there are entire organizations built around providing the same service.
And also, by the way, here's a really good way to look at it. If Epstein was so good at doing their taxes and they needed Epstein to do their taxes, then why didn't they start paying more taxes after Epstein died? It's just so stupid. How are people? Oh my God. That's interesting. Yeah, duh. Oh, maybe he taught them the way. Like Yoda, I like that. Gave him the secret sauce. It was in his will.
This is this without the, links to crimes. They're asking you to believe that when people are talking about Snow White and Beauty and the Beast, they're referencing Disneyland. And they're especially asking you to believe that they have found 900 new victims since reviewing these files and exactly 0 new perpetrators. So
what are the odds? I think this is the reason why people are so angry about this, is the blatant disrespect to the intelligence of the public. That anybody could even for a second believe any of this is not just total fucking bullshit. It's insulting. It is.
Oh, I'm just not buying it personally. I find it insulting.
I'm just not. Yeah.
To the intelligence of every single person.
Yeah. I agree. He's a smart guy. Look at that. Wow. How about that?
Who's ever looked at this story.
Yes.
And really makes me feel like this was a
crime is
appropriate
legal.
Time to launch a crime is legal merch collection, to be honest.
Good one.
So this is probably my last video on this for a while, but just disgusting.
It won't be mine. I'll tell you that. And this is outrageous. Give CoffeeZilla some support. I really like this guy. It's his second channel. I do think, by the way, there is a way to force this into happening. I do. And before you think that it's impossible, you can do anything that you want if you can get enough people together. Anything that you want. You can change the entire Constitution. So just get more people together. It's that simple.
He says he knows for a fact that the Epstein list exists, that there are names on a list. He knows for a fact. He's seen the list. He knows the names. He says this when he's on Sean Spicer. Remember Sean Spicer, the former press secretary for Donald Trump in his first term? He was quite the funny one, was made fun of by SNL quite a lot. But anyway, he has a show now, and Alan Dershowitz went on his show and says he knows for a fact the Epstein list exists. Watch this.
This is not an opinion. This is a fact. I have seen, remember, I was accused falsely on the Epstein, and ultimately I was completely cleared. The woman admitted that she may have mistook me for somebody else and withdrew all of her lawsuits. And so from day one, from the day I was accused, I said I want every document out because I knew every document would prove I was innocent. So let me tell you, I know for a fact documents are being suppressed. And they're being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them. But I'm bound by confidentiality from a judge and cases, and I can't disclose what I know. But I hand to God, I know the names of people whose files are being suppressed in order to protect them. And that's wrong.
Just out of curiosity, without names, are these politicians, business leaders, both?
They're everything. And let me tell you, a lot of them are, at least one of them is somebody who was accused. Others are accusers. And the judges have said, if somebody calls themselves a victim, we're not going to give any information about them, but they may not be victims. They may be perpetrators. So we don't have information about false accusers. And we know there have been many false accusers who have accused innocent people for money. And those records are being deliberately, willfully suppressed. And they shouldn't be suppressed. If the accusation is allowed out, so should the material that diminishes the credibility of the accuser. We want total transparency on this. Every single document, no redaction. That's what I've said from day one. I waive any of my rights of privacy. Anything there is about me, I'm happy because it will be exculpatory, because I know I haven't touched a woman other than my wife from the day I met Jeffrey Epstein. I don't even hug people, but I was falsely accused and I was able to prove it. And I was able to prove it through documents. And I want other people to be able to disprove false accusations through documents. But these documents are being suppressed and withheld.
Well, it's easy to say when you know the documents are never going to be released, right? It's easy to come out and say, I'm innocent. I'm innocent. There's a lot of other innocent people too, because I've actually seen the list and I know whose name's on the list, because you know that the list is never going to be released. And you also know that if the list were released, how would we know that names and evidence haven't been erased from those lists and from those documents? How do we know that things haven't been altered, manipulated by the CIA, by Mossad, by whoever was really behind the blackmail operation? So it's easy to say when you know for a fact that the list is never going to come out. It's easy to say, I'm innocent. And if the list could have just come out there, it would have proven that I was innocent. Easy to say. Just for nostalgia's sake, let's go ahead and just remember the time Alan Dershowitz appeared on this show and made certain claims. Here's one of them. He claims he's innocent. Watch this. Mr. Dershowitz, while I have you here, I covered the Jeffrey Epstein case extensively, and your name came up quite often. Virginia Giuffre actually accused you, then later backtracked, say that she had made a mistake. There were others who had also accused you, but you had said that they couldn't properly identify you or certain parts of you, and therefore...
No. It wasn't identified. It's that one woman said she saw me walking up the stairs of Epstein's house at a time years before I'd ever met Epstein. So that was just a complete made-up story. And the other woman had written a series of letters to the New York Post claiming she had videotapes of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton having sex together, and have many other people. And then, of course, she backed away from all of it. And I've been completely, totally exonerated and vindicated. I never met any of these people. I never heard of them. I defended Jeffrey Epstein the way I've defended hundreds of other people, some guilty, some innocent. But I did absolutely nothing wrong. I've been completely exonerated. I've been completely vindicated. I'm completely innocent. I've never touched anybody sexually since the day I met my wife during the relevant time period. And so I did nothing wrong, and nobody who's ever accused me has done it with any evidence or any credibility. So I'm happy to go on with my life. Let them go on with their lives, but categorically, unequivocally, I did nothing wrong.
So you do admit that you did receive a massage at his mansion?
No. What happened is my wife got a massage at his house. And then I had a neck and shoulder massage from a woman named Olga, who was like 45 years old. Virtually everybody who went to any of Jeffrey Epstein's houses got therapeutic massages. They were offered to everybody, but I've never had a sexual massage or anything improper. I've never been touched by an underage person. So no, that's not true at all.
Okay.
What else? You have anything else you want to throw at me?
Yes, actually, I do. And I did. And this is kind of my point of him coming out now and saying, if they would just release the list, you would see that I was not on it, that there's nothing there. It's totally exculpatory. Well, it's easy to say when you maybe were working for Mossad, maybe you would be able to erase some of that data. Maybe you'd be able to ensure that it never comes out into the public, that the files that are released only only actually implicate people you don't like. You don't need any more people who aren't useful. Here is Alan Dershowitz in that same interview saying that he worked for the state of Israel before I was even born.
Okay.
Just a couple
I
more
did
things.
absolutely nothing wrong. Yeah.
Okay. Well, many of us suspect that Jeffrey Epstein was an asset to Mossad, and that Ghislaine Maxwell was in fact an agent of Mossad. There's a lot
Totally
of evidence
nonsense.
that point to this direction, and
No,
that they
there's no
were
evidence.
operating a blackmail operation in order to get very powerful people, including people like yourself, in precarious positions to where you could potentially work on behalf of the state of Israel or protect the state of Israel.
I've been
in
working
some
on
way.
the state of Israel. I've been working for the state of Israel since before you were born. Jeffrey Epstein once visited me in Israel. He had never been there. He didn't know anybody in Israel. He didn't work for the Mossad. The Mossad wouldn't hire him. And I hope he had videotapes of everybody, because they would show I never did anything improper. I have one other question. Are you used to having people come on your show to talk about one subject and then sandbagging them on another subject without any warning? Because it's nice to know you do that, and it will make certain that I have nothing to hide. I'm happy to talk about any of this, but I'm used to more ethical journalism.
No, we actually did notify the people who booked you onto the show that you would be asked about Epstein, and they assured us that you were aware
No,
of
they
this.
never notified me about that, and you'd have to show me that email.
Okay. One last question. Do you think that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself?
No, of course not. Well, he didn't kill himself without the help of some people. He did kill himself, but he killed himself with the help of guards. He didn't do it by himself. He couldn't have done that. Obviously, though, the videos were turned off, and the guards turned their back, and his cellmate left. So I think he killed himself, but he killed himself with the assistance of some people in law enforcement.
Okay. All right, Mr. Dershowitz, thank you so much for joining the show. Appreciate you
Well,
being
it's
here.
the last time. It's the last time you'll have me on your show. Just take advantage of it.
I think I got what I needed out of you. Thank you very much.
Well, you got what you wanted.
Certainly did. So again, look, it's easy to say now when you know for certain that the list is never coming out. The Trump administration has made sure of that. Trump has even said, "You're still talking about Epstein? Can we move on from this? We have other things to talk about. You're still talking about Epstein?" So, it's easy to say, I know who's on the list. I'm not on the list. I'm innocent. I know a lot of other people who are innocent, and unfortunately, they'll never be able to prove their innocence because the list is never coming out. Again, it's just easy to say when you know the list is never coming out. It's also suspect when you have been admitting to working for the state of Israel since before I was born, and also admitting to even hosting Jeffrey Epstein in the state of Israel, when many of us suspect that Jeffrey Epstein was an asset of Mossad. Maybe he wasn't working directly for Mossad, but certainly was being used as some sort of an asset or a source of some sort, and that is what many of us suspect and will continue to suspect. And you're going to see a lot of this. I think a lot of these people who've been accused, a lot of these people that, there's some accusations or suspicion that they maybe have visited the island or they took Lolita Express or whatever it might be. And they're all going to come out and say, well, if the list would just come out, you would see I'm not on it. Yeah. Okay. Likely story.
Kofi, follow me.